Hordes of goblins, like a sea tide, were advancing on the defenders, and they had no choice but to accept the fight. The front-line commander ordered the tanks to strengthen their positions and hold the line, since any panic could result in death even before the battle began. Amidst the chaos and bloodshed stood the protagonist, ready to write his name into the history of this massacre. Suddenly, a loud explosion deafened everyone, sending up clouds of smoke and debris, hiding the battlefield behind a veil of destruction. One of the knights, overcome with fear, turned to the Lord Necromancer, reminding him of his promise to help and asking with hope if it was possible right now. The hero just grinned, replying that since he was here as a mercenary, he would of course do his job. Without further ado, he raised his staff and easily called upon his necromantic powers, tearing apart the veil between the worlds. In response to his call, skeletons emerged from the darkness, each clutching a different weapon in their bony fingers, ready to fight. Now, united with the people, these grim warriors rushed into battle, confronting the enraged goblins that had long ruled these lands. A whisper went around the squad. Could it really be that same necromancer standing before them, who has been talked about as the strongest lately? And how did he end up in this E-rank dungeon? Now it became clear to them why the group's leader had remained so cool. After all, he had hired a truly powerful ally. Listening to their conversations, the hero felt genuine joy because his necromantic gift, so rare and powerful, was finally receiving the recognition it deserved. In a world where among billions of people only 1,000 could be called necromancers, this profession was truly unique and mysterious. However, his abilities were limited to summoning ordinary skeletons, and now in front of him stood only an E-rank warrior, devoid of any special power. He was well aware of his mediocrity, especially when he heard the fighters around him discussing his skeletons, calling them mediocre in disappointment. Many wondered why he was summoning them at all. Was it really just to demonstrate that even the weakest of the dead were capable of passing this dungeon? In reality, his real name was Ju Dong-hoon, and he was a cursed E-rank necromancer whose fate was inextricably linked to the souls of the dead. He could terrify his enemies with the use of sinister spirits and poisonous spells, but the curse robbed him of all his power, leaving him only skeletons. And sadly, that was why he looked with envy at the ordinary fighters who fought alongside him, possessing much more diverse powers. 10 years ago, when people began to gain unique abilities upon reaching their 20s, his fate was already sealed. Unique abilities were distributed completely randomly. Someone received the gift of a blacksmith or a seamstress, while others had a much more exciting fate. Some were given auxiliary skills, reconnaissance, healing, strengthening allies, and although such abilities seemed non-combat, without them, the groups would not be able to survive. Many people felt dissatisfied because fate distributed gifts indiscriminately, and some were less lucky than they would have liked. However, despite the unfair distribution of power, it was thanks to them that humanity was able to survive the brutal invasion of monsters. Ju Dong-hoon, however, considered himself lucky because necromancy was a rare and enviable power that many dreamed of. Now his squad was jubilant, happy that the skeletons, despite their mediocrity, had successfully cleared this simple dungeon. But even at this moment, Dong-hong felt bitterness because his abilities were limited to the pitiful E-rank skeletons, and with such a gift, he was doomed to wander endlessly through the dungeons. Having completed another cleanup, he approached the group leader and calmly reported that his work for the day was done. The squad leader was pleased, and Dong-hong himself completed the report as required by the mercenary rules, ending the day. After this, the team headed back, promising each other to meet again at the first opportunity. As he returned, Dong-hoon felt a strange mixture of emotions inside him, sighing deeply with a slight hint of sadness. The thought was spinning in his head about how ridiculous and strange this world was, where his abilities were on the verge of uselessness. Although one could see the positives in this, no one expected great achievements from him, but damn it, was it supposed to be like that? It turns out that fate gave him false hope, and sometimes he thought that it would be better to receive a simple crafting ability without any curses. Even with the title of a necromancer, he earned a measly 40,000 won in just one day of hard work in the dungeon. Remembering his previous part-time job, he realized with bitterness that they paid much more for much less risky work. But despite this, he could not give up necromancy, because it was the only thing he wanted to do, when suddenly his attention was drawn to rumors of some important news. He was intrigued by the conversation about the mysterious Dark Lord, who had recently managed to clear the Moon Rift and who had become a ranker in just 3 years. This brought South Korea's total to 37 rankers, firmly holding on to second place in the world behind the United States. Isn't that impressive? What was especially astonishing was that this man had reached such a level in record time, not counting the first hunters, which confirmed the incredible power of necromancy. South Korea was proud to have a powerful necromancer among its rankers who could compete with the best fighters in the world. Dong-hong, upon hearing this news, did not share the general joy and only became more irritated by the injustice of fate. After all, this famous necromancer received his power on the same day as him, but managed to reach incredible heights. One of them turned out to be a cursed necromancer, doomed to summon only weak skeletons, and the other was already standing at the top like a real rancor. Dong-hoon couldn't understand how this was possible, and anger at the injustice of this world boiled inside him. However, once the initial rush of rage had died down a bit, he forced himself to move on without dwelling on these thoughts. He began to realize that perhaps the limits of power were not so fixed, and that much depended on persistence. Even though his abilities are limited, this is no reason to sit back and complain about his fate without trying to change the situation. With this in mind, he decided to step up his training, so he called out his skeletons, ordering them all to appear. Activated skill, Summon Skeleton, E rank. Spends up to 10 units of energy to summon a regular skeleton. A maximum of 10 warriors can be summoned. The second effect of the skill allowed him to give each skeleton its own name, and this fact surprised him greatly because he had never seen anything like this before. It would seem like such a small thing, but suddenly it is a feature that distinguishes his strength from the rest. Although, to be honest, the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he was most likely just deluding himself with empty hopes. After the successful summoning, he greeted his skeletons and even jokingly ordered them to warm up well so as not to strain their tendons. The skeletons obediently fulfilled his request, and he realized that no matter how many times he called them, they were always the same fighters. The first of his subordinates wielded a massive sword, which he fought with inhuman tenacity. The second one used a long spear in battle, which allowed him to keep his opponents at a distance. The third skeleton, unlike the first two, specialized in long-range combat and always carried a reliable bow with him. Looking at his small army, Dong-hong ordered them to train hard and spare no effort. He himself sank to the ground, lost in thoughts about how much effort he had already put into training, but was still at the very beginning of the journey. To his surprise, Dong-hoon noticed that his training was actually starting to bear fruit. Skeletons that previously had difficulty dealing with even one goblin could now fight 3 at once, although their rank remained unchanged. No matter how hard he tried to temper them, even if he hired an S-rank martial artist for them, their strength would not increase even a little bit. These thoughts again brought him to the sad realization that his path as a necromancer was a complete disappointment. However, he couldn't change anything, and some people said things that only made things worse. Someone once said that living without a dream is much worse than keeping a dream in your heart that you will never be able to realize. While Dong-hoon was deep in his dark thoughts, something was watching him from the shadows, ready to interrupt his introspection. Alone with his skeletons, he suddenly heard a strange noise and instinctively turned his head towards the forest. What he saw made his heart clench with horror because he certainly didn't expect to meet such an enemy here. Right in front of him stood an orc in full battle gear, looking with cold interest at the man who had gotten in his way. Dong-hoon turned pale, trying to figure out what the hell this monster was doing in a place where he shouldn't be. To top it all off, the system immediately alerted him that all of his skeletons were suppressed by the enemy's powerful presence, and their stats were reduced by 20%. The boy gritted his teeth, realizing how pathetic and useless they had become in comparison to this monster. And the very fact that an orc appeared here could only mean one thing: a dungeon breakthrough had occurred. A dungeon breakthrough is a catastrophic event where weakened barriers no longer hold back monsters, and they break out into the human world. The orc, noticing the prey, did not hesitate to rush into the attack, and Dong-hong, caught off guard, realized that he could not even die here. In a panic, he shouted an order to his skeletons to block the attack, and they immediately rushed to carry out the command. The orc froze for a moment, looking around at the suddenly appeared barrier, but his surprise did not last long. Feeling annoyed that his first strike had missed its target, he growled in rage and easily threw the skeletons aside. At that very moment, the system mercilessly informed the hero that both of his summoned fighters had been destroyed, and now he was left alone with the orc. The orc, noticing the man, showed an unexpected interest in him and without a second's hesitation, rushed after him in pursuit, like a predator sensing easy prey. However, suddenly the monster roared in pain. An arrow shot by skeleton number 3, who turned out to be a skilled archer, pierced his back. Ju, looking hopefully at his undead ally, understood that despite all the difficulties, he was still desperately clinging to life. He glanced at the system and realized that he only had 70 units of energy left, meaning he would only be able to summon 7 skeletons at most. Without delay, he spent another 20 units to summon the first and second skeletons, increasing his army. He ordered those who appeared first to become a shield, taking the blows, and ordered the archer not to stop firing. The orc, not intending to listen to any strategies, rushed forward, trying to tear the nearest skeletons to shreds. Ju quickly realized that the situation was becoming critical. He called in new fighters, retreated, and then repeated the cycle again. As time went on, he completely lost track of the minutes, as the endless battle merged into one continuous battle for him. Suddenly, the system notified him that all energy was depleted, and the only way to restore it was rest, which was simply impossible now. Ju was well aware that in this situation there was no talk of a break, otherwise he would simply be torn to shreds. Using the last of his energy, he summoned 3 more skeletons, hoping that would be enough. However, the orc, without losing his rage, continued the attack, preparing to smash the emerging dead into dust in one fell swoop. The main character had already resigned himself to his inevitable death, but suddenly the system interface flashed a strange color and announced that a mysterious condition had been fulfilled. The guy barely remembered that a similar notification had appeared earlier, but in the heat of battle he had not had time to check it. When he finally did so, the system solemnly announced that he had achieved the hidden condition and obtained the unique ability of the cursed necromancer. It turned out that to activate it, he needed to use the summoning of a normal E-rank skeleton 10,000 times, which he had already done long ago. As a result, his rank was upgraded to D, opening up completely new opportunities for him. The rank-up rewards were already being prepared for delivery, but Ju couldn't help but beg the system to give him something right now. Just as the orc was about to deliver the killing blow, the system suddenly reported that his energy had been fully restored. Furthermore, his old E-rank skeleton summoning skill had transformed into a D-rank skeleton summoning skill, making his subordinates much stronger. This was immediately apparent when the first skeleton summoned easily parried the orc's attack, and Ju felt the restored energy boiling in his body. Inspired by this, he decided to test his new power and used one of his newly acquired skills. With renewed confidence, he spent another 20 units of energy, calling upon the 4th and 5th skeletons, strengthening his army. Additionally, he used the system's capabilities to immediately equip recruits with suitable weapons, preparing them for the upcoming battle. Ju was surprised to note that the new skeletons not only appeared in battle, but also received weapons, although one of them was a tank and the other a mage. By combining them with the bone ones, 1 through 3, as he dubbed them, he realized that he now had a balanced battle group under his command. Without wasting any time, the skeleton tank with a massive shield rushed to the aid of his allies, ready to take the brunt of the attack. The orc, seeing the new additions to the enemy ranks, roared in rage, realizing that the battle was taking an unexpected turn. In his anger, he decided to test the strength of the newcomer's shield by unleashing the full force of his attack on him. However, to his shock, the strong protective gear turned out to be stronger than his own axe, which flew out of his hands with force and flew to the side. Before he could even realize what was happening, a bright flash illuminated the area directly above his head. Looking up, the orc saw with horror that a blazing fireball was hovering above him, ready to fall down at any second. This powerful attack was performed by skeleton number 5, who turned out to be a mage and activated the first-level fireball skill. Inspired by the example of their wizard, the remaining skeletons rushed to the attack, increasing the onslaught on the enemy. Under the hail of blows, the orc could not stand it, fell to the ground, and Ju realized with amazement that they had indeed won. The system soon confirmed this, reporting that he had managed to defeat a strong opponent. The main character could hardly believe what had happened, because just a moment ago he was sure that he was doomed. However, the reality turned out to be different. They destroyed a formidable enemy, which means that even greater battles await him ahead. At that moment, he realized that the world didn't seem to be getting rid of him so soon, which meant he could move on. Sometime later, he was already sitting peacefully at home, enjoying a serving of hot ramen. Looking at the system, he was surprised to find that his summon normal skeleton skill had now reached rank D. He didn't even imagine that his abilities could develop, despite the fact that he was limited in the choice of creatures he could summon. However, this suited him just fine, because all the efforts put in were bound to pay off in the end. Of course, he didn't yet know when he would be able to reach at least rank C, but he was already satisfied with his current progress. So he decided it was time to go back to basics and see how far he could go. The strength of the intermediate skeletons was already impressive, and Ju wondered what they would become if they could develop even more. For example, he imagined Bone number 5 mastering powerful spells and starting to shower enemies with an icy blizzard. Or maybe the 1st and 2nd will turn into masters of the sword and spear, capable of crushing any enemy. Instead of just thinking, he decided to take action. It was time to make these ideas a reality. Returning to work, Ju overheard a conversation in which they discussed how the upcoming case could be quite troublesome, because in addition to the insurance premium, the risk fee would have to be prohibitively high. Someone noted that the reward was 10 times higher than usual, and jokingly added that with such pay, he would even volunteer to be a porter to gain valuable experience. Ju didn't immediately understand what was being said, but his attention was drawn to the green icon, which meant that this was a C-rank hunter, and he couldn't figure out what such a high-ranking person was doing here. Suddenly, someone spoke to Dong-hun, slightly startling him with their unexpected appearance. The man asked him to come over, saying that he had important news, and upon hearing this, Ju immediately became wary, curious about what kind of information so urgently required his attention. The chieftain asked with an important air if he was familiar with the Parang Guild, the same one founded by the legendary hunter, Giparang. Ju answered affirmatively without hesitation. because in his opinion, there was not a single person in Korea who did not know about this prestigious organization created by the famous rentier Jiparang, known by the nickname Beautiful Bow. His interlocutor reported that it seemed that the guild was going to explore a new dungeon and was looking for porters, and that they were paying quite generously for this work. By generously, he meant an amount that was 10 times the standard fee, which sounded simply unbelievable. Hearing this, Ju almost choked in surprise, because he had no idea that the stake could be so high. The man confirmed that the information was reliable, because the guild even accepts E-rank hunters, and all other offers were just trash compared to this one. Ju thought for a moment, then replied that he would first like to study the information about the dungeon itself in more detail. The worker explained that this was a newly opened dungeon, and it had already proven to be quite a difficult challenge. It turned out that as many as 5 teams tried to pass it, but none of them succeeded, which immediately alerted Ju. In addition, it was announced that the rank of the dungeon has not yet been determined, and this is probably the reason for all the failures. All the previous groups that went to investigate were made up of newbies, but now the situation will change with the intervention of the famous guild, Parang. Given their level, it seemed like everything should go smoothly now that Ju, being just a porter, wouldn't even have to fight monsters. Essentially, his job was just to do his job and get paid for it. It sounded simple enough. However, something inside him told him that there was some kind of catch here, and this catch intrigued him madly. Apparently, the tenfold reward was not generosity, but a kind of compensation for the high risk in this mysterious dungeon. If he was honest with himself, after yesterday's skirmish with the orc, he was mentally exhausted and needed rest. But even despite the fatigue, the offer sounded damn tempting, because as the Dark Lord himself said in his interview, if someone wants to quickly increase their rank, they need to go to dungeons above their level, because there is simply no other way. Of course, as your rank increases, so do the risks, but along with that, new opportunities and more valuable rewards appear. After weighing all the pros and cons, Ju firmly declared that he accepted the offer, to which his boss smiled broadly and praised him for making a damn good decision, because such chances cannot be missed. Ju asked when exactly they were leaving, to which the other man replied that it would be in a week from Paju Station. Hearing this, the guy said that in that case, he would take a week off to prepare. The man supported his decision, thanked him for his participation, and even offered to treat him to food as a token of his appreciation. After some time, Ju used his necromancy again and summoned 5 skeletons, rejoicing at how far he had come. He couldn't help but notice how different his current situation was from before. The training had finally paid off. If he continues to develop in the same spirit, the skeletons will become even stronger. And this, in turn, may lead to the fact that one day he himself will reach the rank of ranker. After thinking for a moment, he ordered his subordinates to take up positions, wanting to test the capabilities of the D-rank skeleton. And so the swordsman, who had previously had difficulty dealing with the goblins, now easily cut through the massive wooden block. His comrade with a spear was not far behind either. He pierced the wooden board as if it were made of paper. However, the most impressive was skeleton number 3, which pierced several trees with one shot of its arrow. Seeing the success of his subordinates, Ju couldn't help but be surprised. Their strength had really increased. They were almost reaching the next rank. Of course, he understood that they had not become omnipotent, but he did not even expect that the progress would be so significant. Now he had to change his training equipment, because the wooden dummies no longer presented any difficulty for them. However, this fact caused him mixed feelings, because it meant that he would have to spend even more money on new equipment. But at the same time, there was no need to be upset. The main thing was that the skeletons became stronger. The real problem was within himself. What could he do if suddenly the enemy decided to attack not the skeletons, but him? In that case, it wouldn't matter how strong his subordinates were if he himself was defeated. Suddenly, something strange appeared in front of Ju. He noticed that the skeleton wizard was heading towards him, holding a spear in his hands. He came closer and suddenly extended a weapon in his direction. Ju froze, not understanding what was happening, and even tensed up a little, becoming wary. However, a moment later the magical attribute was in his hands, which surprised him even more. He couldn't understand what had just happened. Had his subordinate really read his thoughts? Deciding to test his guess, he mentally asked the skeleton if it really understood what he was thinking. And suddenly, not only this skeleton responded to him, but all the others at once. It was amazing. Before they only followed orders, but now they could express their own opinions. The hero wondered if this air shield was another skill that complemented his fireball. While he was thinking, one of his subordinates stepped forward and slammed his shield into the ground with force, raising a cloud of dust. Ju instantly turned around, trying to understand the reason for what happened. The skeleton tank silently pointed at the wooden mannequin smashed to pieces, attracting the hero's attention. The necromancer did not immediately understand the hint and thought about the possible meaning of the gesture. Soon the skeletons began to fight among themselves, turning the training field into a chaos of movements. The tank was fighting several opponents at once, and arrows were already flying from above. However, he used the shield with ease, deflecting all the blows without losing his balance. The hero watched what was happening, amazed at the power of his subordinate. Realizing that the tank could help with training, he decided that the extra equipment might no longer be needed. He then turned his attention to the second skeleton and ordered it to attack. Ju wanted to test the air shield, since it was a basic skill for first-level wizards. The spear was rapidly approaching his face, causing him to instinctively close his eyes. But the defense worked. He realized that this skill was really effective and felt satisfied. Having confirmed this, he informed his subordinates that the training would continue. Having entered into a fight with a skeleton swordsman, he began to practice close combat. Soon a notification appeared informing that the skeleton's strength had been increased by 1 point. This surprised the hero even more, especially when the system unlocked the status window. It contained information about the skills, characteristics, and capabilities of subordinates. The hero assumed that if this function was available to the first number, it would soon appear for the others as well. The guess turned out to be correct, and in a moment the entire army gained access to the statuses. Analysis of the data showed that the characteristics of the first 3 skeletons differed significantly from those of the others. This result confirmed that the training had borne fruit and was not in vain. Now it was time to develop their skills to unlock their potential. Ju decided to make his skeletons the strongest creatures in this world. After some time, the hero found himself at the appointed place, looking around in anticipation of the start of the operation. He changed his clothes, carefully preparing all the necessary equipment for the upcoming test. Having taken the bag and a plentiful supply of food, he prudently took care of possible unforeseen situations. Realizing his role as a simple porter, he decided to do everything perfectly because the mercenaries might urgently need a supply of supplies. One of the fighters called him over, reminding him to follow the instructions, as the group was going to enter the dungeon at the same time. Ju noticed that the dungeon was located near Paju Station, and there was a faint but noticeable energy aura surrounding it. The entrance to the dungeon resembled a natural cave, but it concealed something more sinister and dangerous. There was a sense of tension among the assembled people, indicating the high level of complexity of this place. One of them mentioned that the more saturated the color of the aura at the entrance, the more dangerous its interior. Despite their concerns, some were talking about the imminent completion of the mission and dreaming of enjoying some hot soju soup as soon as possible. Ju was amazed at their carelessness. Were they really so confident in their safety just because they belonged to a large guild? The idea of such a frivolous approach seemed absurd to him and even made him a little angry. There were countless dungeons in this world, and along with them, thousands of hunters who disappeared forever. A huge number of victims and tragedies remained in the shadow of the glory of the powerful rankers. However, the hero was not going to retreat and made a firm decision to go this way to the end. He knew he was putting his life on the line, but he was willing to take the risk for his future. Suddenly, he heard a female voice unexpectedly addressing him with an apology. Turning towards the sound, he looked around in surprise but found no one nearby. The stranger continued to speak, mentioning that she felt D-level energy in him, although the plate indicated E rank. Her words intrigued the hero, making him wonder what the reason for this discrepancy was. Besides, since he's just a porter, it becomes even more interesting to know who this mysterious guy really is. The hero was quite surprised and, embarrassedly apologizing, asked a counter-question about the identity of the stranger. The girl, surprised, reminded him that she had asked the question first and asked why he had hidden Parang's abilities and agreed to the role of an ordinary porter. The hero realized that there must have been a misunderstanding, but was amazed at how she was able to notice such minor details. However, considering that their guild had plenty of A-rank hunters, what difference did it make who he was? The girl did not stop, closely studying his face, and suspected that he might be a spy trained in acting. She noticed that he was too casual about Parang's intelligence capabilities and probably did not expect his identity to be quickly revealed. After these pathetic words, the stranger finally came out of the shadows, and the hero was able to see her. However, what he saw stunned him even more, because the gold plate on her belt indicated that she was of S rank or even higher. This could only mean one thing. Standing before him was the first of the 37 rankers of South Korea, the legendary Dark Empress Gi Soy-Yul, the head of the Parang Guild and the only younger sister of Gi Parang, renowned for her unique killing ability, a person who is best not provoked. The hero didn't even have time to comprehend how dangerous she was, but her piercing gaze made him nervous. The thought that he had the chance to personally interact with the ranker he had always admired seemed almost unreal. Wanting to defuse the situation, he tried to explain that some kind of misunderstanding had occurred. He wasn't a spy and was just a D-rank hunter, and if a rival guild had an interest in Parang, they would likely have a lot of influence. In that case, it is unclear why they would send such a weak hunter like him. There was a moment of silence between them, and then the girl suddenly smiled and admitted that she was just joking. The hero was confused, realizing that he had taken her words seriously. He watched her, wondering why a ranker of her level would pull such a prank. Meanwhile, the surrounding people began to discuss why Dark Empress Gi-So-Yul suddenly appeared in this place. Ju only hoped that she hadn't tried to inquire about him, because that would have looked very strange. Of course, his training with skeletons might have attracted the attention of some rankers. But in any case, an opportunity presented to him by fate itself opened up before him to gain the interest of such an influential person. The girl noticed with a slight smile that he was clearly nervous because of her unexpected behavior. She then apologized for her harshness, which puzzled the hero even more. The interlocutor noted with curiosity that an ordinary E-rank porter was somehow able to contain 5 D-rank energies at once. Ju didn't know what to answer because he understood perfectly well that her observation was absolutely accurate. However, this meant only one thing. She was able to recognize his power thanks to her energy detection ability. So-Yul explained that her older brother had assigned her to join the second team's expedition as a scout, and she was looking for a suitable porter. At that moment he appeared, a very suspicious porter who immediately attracted her attention. After a short talk about reconnaissance, she suddenly offered him to join voluntarily, warning that it could be a little dangerous. With such a skill set, he clearly surpasses all other porters in capabilities. However, he doesn't give the impression of being the kind of person who would get scared and just run away. Ju tensed up and carefully asked if she really thought so. Putting her hand on his shoulder, the girl said with a smile that her instinct for people had never failed her. And to make the offer even more tempting, she added that she was ready to double his reward. The hero realized that he had a real jackpot in front of him, participation in an expedition with a ranker, and even with a double reward. So when she asked if he agreed, he didn't even hesitate and immediately accepted the offer. After all, this was simply too good a chance to miss. When it comes to dungeon ranks, their difficulty ranges from the lowest E to the highest S. These levels are not set by the system, so people had to assess the danger and rank the dungeons themselves. Ranker White Shadow once said that if someone wants to know the rank of a dungeon in advance, then, unfortunately, there are no such methods. It can only be determined after entering. The only thing you can focus on is the brightness of the light around the portal. The darker it is, the more difficult the dungeon may be. However, even this method was inaccurate, so the association established a rule. If more than 5 hunters of the same rank could not clear a dungeon, its level would increase. For example, if 5 A-rank hunters are sent there, but the cleanup fails, that dungeon automatically gets level S. This method was far from perfect, but there was simply no other way than to sacrifice hunters. The dungeon the hero was about to enter had no official rank and fit this description. However, instead of sending the best fighters there right away, they decided to first check it out with a reconnaissance group. It was because of this that Ju sensed the presence of the dungeon faster than the other mercenaries. Very soon, the system notified him about the beginning of the entrance to the dungeon. Once inside, Ju noticed that the lighting was good enough thanks to the luminescent pearls that they wouldn't have any problem seeing. One of the group members jokingly noted that if these pearls could be sold, they could make a good amount of money. But he was immediately reminded that there had already been cases when people died just by touching the dungeon artifacts. Listening to this conversation, Ju realized that his companions had relaxed, which however was not surprising. After all, with the exception of Gi-So-Yul, who was an S-rank, everyone else was an A-rank hunter. The leader of the reconnaissance group immediately called on everyone not to lose their vigilance and to prepare for the exploration. First of all, Swiftblade and Littlefire had to inspect the surroundings, which they agreed to without hesitation. The girl then turned to guide Kang's son Wook, and he immediately asked what exactly was required of him. In response, she instructed him to find a way out and not to forget to cover the porter. The man just chuckled, noting that he had already foreseen such a request. So-Yul asked with interest if this was true, to which he confidently replied that it could not be otherwise. Ju thought about it because this man had a rather unusual nickname, Guide, which the system gave him for his unique ability to find his way through the most difficult dungeons. The girl noted that now that everything was distributed, it was time to hit the road. The guide turned to the porter with a sudden question about whether he was nervous, to which Ju hesitated a little, and then admitted that it would be a lie to deny it. The man looked at him carefully and advised him not to lose this feeling. He explained that there were too many suspicious moments in this dungeon to act carelessly. In his opinion, if even the Dark Empress remained cautious, then the rest of us shouldn't relax either. The environment seemed too calm, the structure of the cave was too simple, and therefore the probability of monsters appearing was extremely low. After all, if someone lived here, then at least a light echo of footsteps, the sound of breathing or barely noticeable vibrations should have been heard. And since nothing like this is felt, it means that most likely there is something else hidden here. Ju asked in surprise if he could really say that without even starting a full-fledged exploration, to which the guide answered affirmatively without a shadow of a doubt, since he had been studying the dungeons for many years. He then invited Ju to follow him while they looked for a way out, as ordered. The hero agreed without objection, although he noticed that their route deviated from the path taken by the other hunters, but decided that everything should be fine. They moved forward when suddenly the man admitted that he felt uneasy. Ju became wary, while the guide continued to think out loud that there were no traps or even hints of clues in this place. Then the guide asked Ju if he felt any heaviness in his body, or if he was the only one who felt this way. Ju admitted that he had goosebumps and wasn't sure if they should continue on their way. The guide nodded, agreeing that he too was experiencing a strange feeling, something that had never happened to him before. Even meeting the rancor didn't cause him such concern. It's as if something absurd, beyond the scope of ordinary monsters, awaits them ahead. Remembering that Ju had recently spoken about his abilities as a necromancer, Gid suggested that he summon the undead so that in case of danger he would have at least some chance of salvation. Without a second thought, Ju grabbed the staff and activated necromancy. As usual, 5 skeletons appeared in front of him. However, summoning the creatures used up 50 energy points out of the 100 available. The guide looked at the skeletons with an appraising glance and asked in surprise if he had anything stronger. Ju replied with irritation that this was all he had. At that moment, they were both alerted by a strange sound, and then suddenly a crushing, overwhelming force rolled in. Ju didn't understand what was happening and immediately turned to the guide with a question. The man shouted sharply at him to keep going as there was open ground ahead. Ju asked, puzzled, what difference did it make if they couldn't get there? Sunwook shouted that he didn't know for sure, but he felt the presence of several creatures, which meant that there was a zone suitable for life ahead. There may be previous teams there, or monsters, but either way they need to move. People and skeletons rushed forward despite the impending threat. Ju felt the situation was becoming critical. The pressure was so intense that he could barely keep his eyes open or even breathe. The force was so powerful that even moving became incredibly difficult. The skeleton wizard, noticing that his master was in a difficult situation, used the first-level skill Air Shield. However, literally a moment later, the system reported that the shield had been shattered into pieces. The pressure became unbearable. Ju couldn't stand it, and blood gushed from his mouth. He immediately turned to the skeleton number 1, hoping that he could help. Ju realized that the force affecting them was so great that it was capable of destroying defensive skills the moment they were activated. However, the guide was somehow able to advance significantly further, and this was amazing. Suddenly, disturbing thoughts began to spin in his head. Was it worth getting involved in this adventure at all? If the dungeon recently discovered in Paju turned out to be a trap of super high difficulty, even for rankers, this place would be a serious test, and he, an ordinary guy, just wanted to live, not play deadly games. To reach the highest level among hunters, he would first have to at least stay alive, and only then think about great feats. Suddenly, the space around them began to tremble strangely, and the system announced that he had entered a certain zone and had now reached the stage of an elderly man with snow-white hair, radiating an icy resentment. Ju was taken aback. What nonsense! Since when does the system allow such ridiculous formulations, and what does an elderly man with a grudge even mean? He reread the system message and realized that it was not about him, but about an enemy whose resentment was so deep that even his hair was covered in icy frost. So the only way forward was to enter the hall and defeat the old man, whose anger froze the air around him. Now everything fell into place. This mysterious white-haired man is none other than the boss of the dungeon, and a serious test lies ahead. As Ju pondered, torn between doubt and determination, his attention was drawn to a strange voice coming from a dark corner. It turned out that they were the long-lost hunters, and they were asking with undisguised joy whether the rescue team had finally arrived. The protagonist frowned, realizing that these people were probably trying to escape a deadly trap, but were stuck here in despair. However, upon seeing the purple badge on the guide, they suddenly froze in awe, realizing that they were facing a high-ranking hunter. To top it all off, there were ancient skeletons lying around everywhere, meaning there might be a necromancer lurking nearby, which would make the situation even more dangerous. The hunters begged for help, asking for at least a little food and water because thirst and hunger were slowly killing them even faster than the dungeon itself. Then the man, who remained cool in the midst of the general chaos, nodded and ordered that the food be distributed first. The dead do not eat, but the living can still get out. Ju felt a strange sense of guilt. He had run away to save himself, but these people remained here, trapped in their fear. However, he quickly pushed away his doubts, reminding himself that this was the reality of the dungeons. Only the one who acts first survives. Soon, the surviving hunters received food and greedily pounced on it, like animals that had finally escaped from hungry captivity. Watching their greedy gulps, Ju thought with grim certainty that just one wrong decision, and he could be in their place. The ranger, noticing their frantic haste, frowned and advised them to eat more slowly so as not to harm themselves even more. Then he asked the key question: can they explain what actually happened in this place, and what is the nature of the dungeon? One of the hunters, who seemed the most collected, stood up and declared that he would speak on behalf of their entire surviving group. As it turned out, he was a B-rank hunter, meaning he was the strongest among those who managed to survive. According to him, this dungeon is not just difficult, it is a real curse, because in all his years of hunting, he has never encountered anything like this. The interlocutor was surprised, asking again what made this place so strange, and in response the hunter only grinned darkly, spreading his hands. Just look for yourself. There is no exit here. It can be said that from the very beginning, no matter which way they go, this damned cave will lead them to this door. It is likely that it serves as the very key that will open the way to the boss of this sinister dungeon. The people stuck here were enveloped in a strange aura, preventing them from even getting close to the exit. Ultimately, they were left with only one option, to take a risk and challenge what was hidden behind the massive door. However, the difficulty of the test was so insane that it seemed impossible for anyone in their right mind to overcome it. The legendary old man with gray hair, filled with resentment, was like a living curse, and no one who encountered him could defeat him. For low or even mid-ranked hunters, this fight was akin to a baby trying to defeat an ancient dragon. However, if an A-rank hunter were to stand against him, the outcome might be completely different, so one of the people hopefully asked Guide if he could pull them out of this nightmare. In response, the guide only looked at him intently, but did not say a word, leaving them in tense anticipation. The group of survivors asked for a minute to think. If the boss is really as strong as they say, then how did they manage to stay alive? The interlocutor nodded thoughtfully and replied that this question was indeed interesting. After all, oddly enough, the old man does not kill anyone. Instead, he seemed to be conducting some sort of selection process, putting everyone to the test, which immediately intrigued Ju. One of the survivors confirmed that no one knows the exact details, because they were simply beaten half to death. Then the old man just clicked his tongue in disdain, throwing out the phrase, "This one is no good," and continued his strange ritual. And the most unexpected thing was that after that, he simply threw them back without even trying to finish them off. Ju was shocked again. Could there be a boss that doesn't kill, and what kind of dungeon is this? The hunter, speaking on behalf of the group, added thoughtfully that perhaps the answer lay in the old man himself. After all, he remained human. This was the first time that the dungeon boss was not a monster or a demon, but an ordinary mortal, albeit with frightening power. This fact was unsettling, and Ju couldn't help but wonder how this was even possible. Either way, they had to open that door and complete the test if they wanted to find a way out. However, he was in no hurry to trust Kong Sung-wook because he was a hunter with a specialization as a guide, which meant he could be hiding something important. Now he faced the main dilemma, how to proceed further and who he could rely on in this situation. But before he could come to any conclusion, his thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of Soy Yul, who had arrived here along with Hua Chun. The girl was quickly explained the current situation, and having heard everything, she nodded silently, quickly assessing the situation. Then, after gathering her thoughts, Soy Yul confidently declared that they should enter right now, because judging from their aura, the survivors were neither doppelgangers nor an illusory trap. Soy Yul was worried about the powerful aura that enveloped this place, but sitting idly by was simply unacceptable. Hearing her confident words, the survivors breathed a sigh of relief, because now their salvation was almost guaranteed. After all, a huntress from the Parang Guild stood before them. The Dark Empress merely nodded and ordered the porter and the survivors to remain here while she took care of the dungeon. Ju thought about it. The difference between S and A ranks seemed simply colossal, as if there was an impassable chasm between them. Moreover, Soy Yul was among the top 1,000 rankers in the world, and this spoke for itself. The girl did not waste time on conversations, and commanded everyone to get ready, as they were going inside immediately. With these words, she confidently opened the massive door, behind which something unknown was hidden. Not much time passed, and Ju, as usual, sat waiting for the results, hoping for the strength of high-ranking hunters. But suddenly the silence was broken by some strange screams coming from behind the door. As it turned out, several hunters who entered with Soy Yul were simply thrown out of the boss's room like useless ragdolls. But the most shocking thing was that the girl herself soon followed them, flying out with a roar. Her wounded body and tattered clothes made it clear that the battle had been far more brutal than anyone could have imagined. Ju, watching this chaos, was stunned and could not understand what the hell was going on here. If he understood correctly, less than 10 minutes had passed since their entry, and they were already out of action. It was simply impossible to believe that an S-class ranker was so quickly defeated and thrown back as if it were an insignificant obstacle. The Dark Empress was seething with anger, unable to accept the fact that she too had proven to be unsuitable for the boss, and she turned to the porter in a rage. Ju flinched slightly at her sharp tone, but immediately asked what exactly was required of him. She didn't hesitate to order him to take out the top-tier potion from his bag, because she had no intention of giving up. The guy was taken aback. Was she seriously planning to go back there after she was beaten so badly? As he handed her the bottle of elixir, he couldn't help but ask if she was sure of her actions, to which Soy Yul calmly replied, "The survivors were telling the truth. The old man doesn't kill, he just beats." These words only increased his bewilderment, but the girl added that now, on the contrary, she was full of determination. "If I go to him again, he has to let me know whether I'm right for him or not," she said with genuine conviction. Ju frowned. The term suitable sounded more like an expression that masters used when looking for a worthy disciple. In that case, perhaps the reason for the old man's dissatisfaction was that he simply did not find worthy talent among the applicants. Without a moment's hesitation, Soy Yul drank the potion in one gulp. Her wounds began to heal, and without turning around, she stepped back into the darkness of the boss's room. It was at this moment that Gi Soy Yul's endless ordeal began, turning into a real nightmare. Time after time, she would enter the boss's room and then return beaten, as if she had been sent to a brutal training session without end. Once again, barely catching her breath, the girl exploded with rage and screamed that this was driving her crazy. What kind of crazy whim did this old man have? What else did he want from her? This old stubborn man turned out to be not only a master of the sword, but also a magnificent spearman, which only added fuel to the fire. But now she swears, it's time to find out who will emerge victorious this time. Ju, watching this absurdity, treated her persistence with skepticism, but day turned to night, and everything remained the same. One day, 2, 3, 4, Gi Soy Yul did not stop, challenging the invincible old man again and again. It seemed that the limit of her capabilities had long been exhausted, but each time she got up and went back, amazed that this monster also possessed magic. Now it became completely clear. No one here knew how to deal with him. Ju realized that the situation was out of control. Even if Gipparang showed up with a whole squad now, it would be almost impossible to defeat the boss. He had an uneasy feeling that even 5 high-level rankers wouldn't be able to defeat this old man. Finally, even the Dark Empress admitted that the enemy was unimaginably strong, but as long as she lived, she would not stop challenging him. The hero was amazed by her tenacity. It was not just stubbornness, but determination worthy of a true top-class ranker. However, unrest was already beginning among the survivors, because no one could cope with the dungeon, and the weight was becoming unbearable. Even Ju himself seemed to be feeling some strange annoyance, even though he had no intention of participating in this battle. Perhaps that is why he could not just sit on the sidelines with his hands folded. He imagined all the hunters here had already passed through this door and returned beaten and broken. But all this is not the wording that can be used here, because everyone passed except for Ju. And so, having made a final decision for himself, he stood up and confidently headed towards the boss's door. Gi Soy Yul noticed his movement and, puzzled, asked what he was going to do. Ju calmly but firmly replied that he thought he should try too. Soy Yul froze for a moment in surprise, not believing her ears, and asked again if she had heard wrong. Is the porter really going to enter a dungeon where even the rankers were powerless? The huntress nicknamed Swiftblade intervened. She was sure that this guy was just a novice necromancer, capable of summoning only weak skeletons, and therefore he should know his place. After all, a porter should behave like a porter, just carry bags and not imagine himself a hero. Having said these words, he immediately touched his sword. The main character saw this and realized that the situation was not developing as he had imagined. Suddenly, the Dark Empress asked him to wait. Why did he want to do this? Was it because he didn't trust her? Ju realized that he had been misunderstood and said that that was not the issue. The girl stated that, according to the original contract, he was a porter and could not express his opinion about exploring the dungeon. The hero replied that he knew this very well, and his interlocutor then asked if she could inquire why he wanted to dispute this. The guy stated, based on the words he heard, the old man said that he was looking for the right person. He thought that the old man's discontent might be related to finding a worthy disciple for him. And a worthy student must have potential. He does not necessarily have to be perfect. In other words, it does not mean the current level of skill. Soy Yul noticed. So he was now saying that he wanted to make the old man his teacher and not defeat him. The guy added that this could be the hidden condition. Speaking of hidden conditions, sometimes there are alternative ways to get through dungeons. The Dark Empress noticed, let's say he lied, but how she was going to become his student. Does he really want to say that he has more potential than her? Looking at the girl's subordinate, the hero realized that it was becoming more and more tense. That's why he said he very much doubted that this was possible. Then the interlocutor came closer to him and said that he didn't deny it. Trying to justify himself, Ju said that she had misunderstood everything. It's just about the pain that everyone else is experiencing except him, and he has the feeling that he's the odd one out here. He also wonders if she's on a break now. Soy Yul smiled at first, and then said that it was so now he showed his true face. She, in turn, knew this from the very beginning, and said earlier that she was suspicious. After all, in her opinion, his eyes are like those of a wolf on the hunt. So does he really want to get the dungeon reward and hope for a successful meeting during the raid? After thinking about it, the protagonist decided that she should be a fortune teller, not a ranker. It's completely unclear how she can read a person so quickly, just by looking at him. Well, the interlocutor continued to say that if she was thinking about it, then let someone else try. There was no other solution anyway, and she wanted to rest. As he said, it is so. so she is satisfied with everything. Besides, she is not one of those who slander. In the end, she also failed. Ju asked if she really allowed him. The girl answered positively, but noted that he only had one chance. How can he see their rations are running low and the rescuers are still coming, which means they need to sort this all out as soon as possible? The protagonist thanked her politely enough for this and said that he understood everything. Then he made up his mind that he was going to challenge the boss and walked up to his door. The system then informed him that he could challenge the scene by opening the door and asked if he really wanted to do so. The hero immediately opened the doors, and there was a scene with an elderly man with gray hair and filled with deep resentment. Its types, in turn, are so deep that an icy layer forms in the hair. And after he was told to defeat the old man, a bright light rolled across the room. The old man, who was there a few moments later, simply disappeared. The hero was surprised by this and could not understand where he had gone. And after a few seconds, he already felt pressure, which immediately put him on one knee. After that, the boss showed up and asked what it was that first a decrepit girl had come, and now an even more pathetic guy. It's not even worth looking at, so he just has to get rid of it. In the eyes of this old man, the hero saw a bright flash that seemed to look into his soul, and he felt a very strong enemy in front of him, as well as his onslaught. Suddenly the system turned golden and reported that in front of him were the memories of a damned soul. Hidden condition achieved. This is the hidden condition for the unique ability, Cursed Necromancer, meeting with the memory of the cursed soul. The necromancer ultimately commands the dead, so let him face the damned soul with strong determination. Then there was congratulations that the hidden skill was unlocked, and the guy received a rank S memory restoration skill, which surprised him greatly, thinking that he was sleeping. And after a few seconds, the system said that he was using this memory restoration skill. The hero didn't understand how he was using it, but if you think about it, the old man said to get rid of it, but he doesn't do anything. At that moment, the memory of the cursed soul of the master of all techniques was recreated, and soon the guy will be transferred. When this message appeared, the light became even stronger, and Ju could not see. Very soon he found himself on some peak of a snow-covered mountain. The boss of this dungeon was also located there on the top of the mountain. He asked why there were no suitable candidates, but it was too wasteful to leave like that. What a meaningless life. He worked so hard to get to where he is now, and now he is being asked to give it all up. After looking around a bit, the guy realized that this was some other world altogether. Taking a look at the area, he became curious as to whether they really existed. Suddenly, he felt some strange feeling. These were the emotions and memories of the old man, perhaps. He in turn continued to speak. After all, it was quite an interesting life. Swordsman, spearman, assassin, archer, mage, buffer, healer, and more. When a person knows how to control the flow of chi, all techniques become one. The old man, who had overcome everything and everyone, lived for a very long time, but even chi could not stop his aging. He said that now drinking cold water was like calling it poison, and the air that was once light seemed to be pressing on him, wanting to kill him. It's really very painful and excruciating, but he can't just die like that. Yes, it's true, it would be too unfair to die now. He continued to say what a pity, because he just wanted to find one student to whom he could pass on this ability. And he cannot understand how there can be no one with sufficient talent. The idea of a single successor was nothing more than his senseless greed. So very soon he fell to his knees and with tears in his eyes begged that he could no longer live like this. Having said that he would sell his soul just to leave his name behind, he immediately fell to the ground. And when this happened, the system window appeared again, which reported that the memory recovery skill had ended, after which the hero found himself again in the boss's room with him. Suddenly, he realized that this place was quite familiar. Looking around, he realized that this was the boss's room, and the system reported that the master of all techniques was looking at him. Ju realized that he had returned, but he simply couldn't imagine how stuffy it was here. But even with everything that's happening to him, he now has hope. The old man in turn stated that he, it turns out, looked into his soul and asked whether it was interesting to him. And in the system window, there was text saying that the master of all techniques was interested in him. The guy, trying to overcome the pressure that was pressing on him from all sides, said that he had looked in. And he thought, if this old man is really looking for a disciple, someone who can inherit his enormous power and knowledge, and then he firmly decided that he should become exactly this student. The boss said anyway, other than being a little interesting, he has nothing else, he is worth nothing, and he has nothing to withstand his techniques. As he spoke these words, the master used his power again and applied even greater pressure. The main character called him an elder and asked him not to do this. If he continues in the same spirit, he will never find a disciple for himself. He will forever remain a ghost, unable to cope with his resentment, and then people will remember him as a straight ghost of complete stubbornness. The sage got angry, calling him an impudent brat. He visited such ants with his boundless generosity. So does he really need to break this man's leg to make him come to his senses? Trying to ease the situation a little, Ju asked not to do this and listened to him. It turns out that the master has mastered all the techniques, and the people of this world try to master at least one in their entire lives. The interlocutor noted that this was simply impossible because the world is huge and time is eternal. There will surely be another genius like him. Then the guy asked to remember the woman who came a little earlier. Could he believe that she was one of the strongest in this world? The old man was very surprised by this. Ju thought that considering that a ranker like Gi Soyul was his final goal, the old man's reaction hurt him. But in any case, if you look at him now, he definitely took the bait. Suddenly the sage shouted, "This is impossible. How can she be one of the strongest with such skill? Most likely he is just trying to deceive him." The hero immediately asked him to look into his eyes to see if they look like the eyes of a dishonest person. He knows that it's easy enough to tell if he's lying just by looking into his eyes. The old man didn't even have to look long to understand everything, and he said that he was telling the truth, but it was a great pity. Then Ju added, "If no one meets his standards, how about using him?" The interlocutor did not quite understand what was being discussed and how to use it, and the hero said that he should pass on his abilities to him. The sage did not understand whether he should really take him as a student. He considered him impudent, but now he also turned out to be shameless. It would be better to teach trash than him. The guy immediately stated that he was not asking to be taught specifically by him. Then he immediately reached for the system window and hoped that he would not make a mistake. After which, using his own power of necromancy, he summoned ordinary D-rank skeletons, stating that if the old man really was an elder, then he was sure he would be able to see their potential. The boss was very surprised when he saw the technique used in front of him. And the hero wondered if evolving skeletons didn't have unlimited potential. And with such potential, each of them has their own unique abilities, so it will even be easier for him to teach them. And even as he thought, he wants one heir, so there is no need to worry. After all, even if they all evolve, the guy will be the only one who will inherit all of this, which is why I asked what he thought about it. They don't feel pain, so they will have more endurance than anyone and will be more ready for challenges than anyone because they are fearless. The elder, looking closely at the skeletons, thought for a while. And then he simply turned around and headed in an unknown direction. The guy thought that his strategy had not worked and did not know what to do next. At that moment, the boss stated that it was quite funny and ironic that the successor he was looking for was not a human, but an undead. Their potential is truly enormous. They must have been exceptional warriors in life, and he always wanted to have such disciples. It's a pity that they are now dead. In addition to all this, it may be difficult to teach more than one, but he still agrees and believes that he must make some kind of compromise. And after these words, the system reported that he had fulfilled a hidden condition for the scene of an elderly man with white hair, full and deep resentment. The elder said that he would trust his words and believe the determination in his eyes, but he needed to promise something. No matter what trials befall him, he will inherit everything, he will own something, and in that case, he will leave a trace of it somewhere in this mortal world. The system window reported the condition of his recognition, if he wants to be called by a transcendent from another world. A master of all techniques, he must reach a certain level. And this condition will be to convince him. Ju said that he will not miss this chance, which comes once in a lifetime, but will inherit everything, no matter what. The old man was delighted, and a congratulation appeared in the system window, saying that he had cleared the stage of an elderly man with white hair, full of deep resentment. And the next time the guy opened his eyes, he found himself in a hospital bed. As soon as he did this, he heard a female voice saying that he had finally woken up. The heroes couldn't understand who it was, so he immediately stood up and asked who was there. To his surprise, he saw Gi Soyul, who was wearing a service suit. The first thing that came to mind was the thought that he was in a hospital. The girl asked to introduce herself again. She is Gi Soyul, guildmaster of the Parang Guild. She is also better known by her pseudonym, the Dark Empress. Ju knew all this perfectly well, but it was unclear what she was doing in his hospital room. He doesn't even remember what happened after clearing the dungeon. He probably lost consciousness. The interviewee said that she was really surprised. To be honest, she thought that the boss was impenetrable. But who would have thought that the gentleman porter would be the one to clean it up? This tone of conversation in turn did not please the guy at all and frightened him. That's why he asked why she was looking at him like that. The girl continued doing this without saying anything, and the hero said that he was interested in why the deputy guildmaster of one of the largest guilds came to him. The Dark Empress came closer and asked if it wasn't obvious, because she was curious too. How exactly did he get through this absurd dungeon and what reward did he receive for it? On top of all this, did he really become the old man's disciple and so on? Ju understood her questions were justified. The dungeon belonged to her, and he was given only one opportunity. From her point of view, he is just a random guy who stole her achievement, and a more cruel ranker might have already beheaded him for stealing his loot. The hero did not answer for a long time, so the girl asked what the porter was thinking about so deeply. Then Ju asked, before answering her questions, if she could tell him what the news was saying about this dungeon exploration. Soyul understood what he was worried about. She didn't need it. They reported that the advance party of the Parang Guild had successfully cleared the dungeon, and they forced all the survivors to sign non-disclosure agreements. The hero rejoiced and wondered if this meant that the public did not know that it was he who cleared the dungeon. So he bowed down and thanked the Dark Empress for caring for him. The girl stated that he seemed older than he was. Most hunters would kill for the opportunity to brag about their achievements to the whole world. The hero said that for him, safety is still above all else. The interlocutor noted that in that case there was no need to thank her. For the Parang Guild, this was also a source of pride. Would anyone believe that the porter who became the main hero of the expedition was an E-rank mercenary and not a ranker? It became clear to Ju, so they keep it a secret because it embarrasses them. And if he reveals the truth to the world, he can be dealt with quietly. So he turned to the girl, and she asked him what he wanted. He asked how long he had been unconscious, and was told that 3 days had passed since they had left the dungeon, so it was about the same amount of time. The guy realized that it was really bad, because he had been unconscious for a long time, but he had a lucky opportunity thanks to Gisoyul. But it is not worth chatting about awards, it can put him in danger therefore, he said. He really appreciates what she thinks about him. To be honest, he himself does not know yet. He has not even figured out the awards. Therefore, it will take a little time to answer the questions properly. He also asked him not to worry that he would escape, because he knew that no hunter in this world could hide from the eyes of the Dark Empress. Analyzing the situation, the girl looked at him for a moment. And then she agreed and said that she appreciated it and would come back when he sorted everything out. After the guy thanked us, she slammed the door behind her and left. At that moment, Ju could finally relax and did it. At the same time, I thought that life lately had been simply exciting, talking about waking up after 3 days and meeting a ranker in a strange dungeon to boot. On top of all this, he may end up on the wrong side of Parang if he is not careful, but at the same time, he will be able to build a good relationship with him. At that moment, a system window appeared and announced that he was checking his awards. The guy realized that he had fainted and did not even have time to check his awards. Therefore, he started doing it now. The first to congratulate him on the fact that his energy had permanently increased by 20, and he also received the skill of learning all S-rank techniques. Therefore, he had 3 skills: summoning a skeleton, restoring memory, and learning all techniques. Having looked at everything that appeared to him, the hero was very happy. He thought, so, even though his veterans were so obsessed with dungeons, he became interested in what this restoration of memory about reading the dead seemed like a hidden skill. Ju was indeed glad that he was able to read the old man's memories thanks to this skill, but he couldn't say that he was impressed. But in any case, he is sure that someday he will find a worthy use for it. Then he began to understand how to teach all the techniques. There were several effects, and the first was to spend 20 energy to summon the master of all techniques. He cannot use physical force in this world, and can only transmit his knowledge. Also, the duration of this skill is 24 hours, and only the user of the skill can see the master of all techniques. Having figured it out completely, the hero immediately stood up and got ready to train. After a short period of time, he was already at the training ground with his things. Well, of course, the first thing he did was apply the skill of teaching all the techniques. This created a bright flash, exactly the same as the one the dungeon boss had. Of course, an old man appeared from it, who called the guy a brat and said that he had called him just in time. The guy, in turn, was very happy when he saw him. But for this, he immediately received a blow to the head, and a new nickname comes. The master shouted after promising that he would inherit everything. Why did he only summon him now? If he really is that lazy, then he simply won't be able to stand it. Ju asked not to get excited because he called him as soon as he came to his senses. And meanwhile, I thought about whether this old man was capable of physically influencing this world, so it was unclear how he hit him. The master said, as expected, he still had a long way to go because his facial expression was very easy to read. It turns out that they are mentally connected, so let him tell him whether he should have difficulty hurting him or not. In any case, since he had called, he should start immediately because they didn't have time, and the guy had to agree. Then he asked if he understood correctly that he simply had to summon skeletons, and his interlocutor stated that this was not the case. There was simply no need for this. After all, first it is necessary to decide what he will study today. He understands perfectly well the talent of these 10. But the main problem still lies in the guy. And the main character didn't understand why the main problem was him, or whether the old man was trying to teach him. Soon the teacher asked him if he knew why he was called the master of all techniques. It turns out that he got this nickname after learning and refining countless talents. So did he really think that he only had 10 techniques to learn? Smiling madly, he announced that all the other techniques would go to the guy. To say that Ju was surprised by this would be an understatement, because he certainly didn't expect this. In order to understand the situation, he told the teacher that he himself had said that his talent was trash. The master got angry about this and shouted at him to shut up. And since he gave him this promise, you must inherit all his skill. And if he cannot do this, then let him try until he can. The old man can use one of his arts to make trash comparable to genius. And at the same time, it's very good that he can point out its physical impact. There are several arts that he created but was never able to apply. Hardened meridians can be opened with key. Oh, his body should improve if he massages it for 300 days. It will hurt, but he noticed that he is very persistent, so he should be able to handle it. The guy was even more discouraged and realized that he was the owner of the body. Why then was he so happy to set a price for him? So he told the gentleman that he did not feel his heart was ready yet. But the old man shouted again that you had covered your mouth. Does he know how many people want to learn from him in the world where he comes from? This is called the great technique of the celestial master, an art he created in the last years of his life after much thought. Jew, I understand if he had such a technique, shouldn't he have used it earlier? After all, it's a technique that can turn trash into a genius. The man stated that he understood perfectly well what he was thinking about, and that he had to use his own energy as payment for this technique. As he thinks, what would happen if he changed a talentless student and increased his talent? The moment he did this, his body would melt and disappear. The hero wondered, but then, what would happen to him now? The sage said that he had already died, so everything would be fine, and Ju realized that this was a very convenient way of thinking. He then asked to be allowed to ask if he couldn't take any of those who tried to challenge him and use this technique on them, since he was dead then too. The mentor hit him again because of this and called him an idiot. The student couldn't understand why he hit him again. And the old man said that even when he tells him something, he doesn't understand the meaning, so he's definitely untalented. Didn't he already say before that this is what turns trash into genius, and it has no meaning unless used on trash, only useful if the target is at the food waste level? Ju, listening attentively to his conversation, realized that they were talking about him. The old man said it wouldn't work on people who weren't at that level. After all, their bodies had already been influenced by other energies. Compared to them, the guy's body is very pure and also weak, although he has the ability to summon the dead, but it did not change the body. Moreover, this is only the second way. After all, the born genius is more impressive than the created. Initially, he was going to find a more impressive prospect than him. It became clear to Ju that the old man's words were harsh towards him, but not without meaning. Then I thought, what if it's not just about the skeletons, but that he too can become stronger? That would be exactly like killing two birds with one stone. Finally, the sage asked him if he was ready. The guy, without a second's hesitation, said that he was ready. A short time after the training began, he was already screaming. In terrible pain, he begged to wait at least a minute. The elder did not want to stop and continued to do this and asked why he was shouting, since he had not even started yet. The guy thought, should he really endure all this? If he wants to become a ranker, then he should endure this too. But the teacher's words that this was only the beginning still frightened him greatly. And he, in turn, noted that, as he said, the guy is persistent, so this is good, and he will increase the pace. Ju begged himself and his body to endure all of this. And soon a system notification appeared, which informed him that he had received the skill of pain resistance, and this skill had the potential for further development. At that very moment, the mentor made his own final blow, which was very powerful, and the guy's body, almost without strength, immediately fell to the ground. The old man said that this was all for the great technology. He had done an excellent job. Even though he was trash, he was able to withstand a lot. He, in turn, has the desire to become stronger, as well as the willpower and perseverance to endure all this. So the sage was still glad that not all was lost. The hero gathered his strength and you asked if they were finished for the day. And the interlocutor could not understand what he was talking about, because they still had 30 minutes left. So he lifted the student up and told him to get up. Did he really think that today he would only enjoy the massage? And pointing to the skeletons, he asked if life was not waiting for him. Ju had no choice but to agree to this, and in the end, he thought that he wanted to die. The master said that the basis of all professions is physical strength. It seems that these skeletons can build up physical strength even without muscles. But if that is the case, then it should start with correct posture, which is the riding posture that he used often throughout his life. The human body's muscles are concentrated in the lower body, so a strong foundation is key to developing strength and stability. The hero thought that he had just beaten the crap out of him and was now forcing him to stand in this pose. The master noticed that, as he had said, the boy had no talent. However, if he has one thing, it is definitely tenacity. Besides, the master shouldn't be weaker than the creatures he summoned. The boy knew that. That's why he was trying his best to endure it. After all, his muscles are already torn and can't even recover. In that case, it's unclear what the point of these trainings is. It's just some kind of torture. After a short period of time, Ju collapsed to the ground, exhausted. And the teacher announced that training was over for today, but he ordered the guy to do this every morning, otherwise he shouldn't even think about calling him. The hero reluctantly agreed, and the system reported that the skill for learning all techniques had expired. There was also a message that the new one could only be used after 24 hours, and the master of all techniques was also recalled. The skeletons lined up next to the guy and looked at him. The hero turned to the first number, and he looked at him attentively. And the gentleman asked if he could carry him, because at that moment he couldn't even walk. Very soon he returned to work, and was immediately met by an acquaintance. It was the man who had given him the recent task. He said that the guy was finally here and that he should come to him quickly. Pointing at a few guys, he asked if he recognized them. They were one of the teams that survived in the last dungeon. Ju looked at them carefully and realized that he really did remember them. The guys just asked the necromancer how he was doing, and it seemed like he had changed a little, because he looked more muscular and even better. The heroes of these words were a little embarrassed and wondered if they had really just said that, although this is indeed true because he gained some weight. It turns out that his shoulders also became broader, as if even the structure of the skeleton had changed. The thought came to mind that this could really be the result of a 30-minute massage. Although in any case, why these hunters suddenly came for him is very interesting. In order to find out this, he asked why they had come here, and the interlocutor immediately apologized for introducing himself so late. He is pleased to meet you, and asks to allow me to formally introduce myself. This man's name is Kang Jae-ho, a S-rank hunter. The guy's actions and behavior impressed him, and since they got out alive, he would like to work with him. And then the hero understood everything. He noticed that he already knew that he was just a mercenary, a necromancer low down the mountain, and his name was Ju Dong-hoon. Then they said that they should get down to business. There is another dungeon. It is a well-known low-ranking guy, and they want to hire him. This man heard that he was experiencing financial difficulties and was willing to take any job. The main character realized who could have blabbed and immediately looked at his employer. He realized that this guy had cheated them by selling him out to get his job back. Although Ju said it was indeed true, he needed money. The interlocutor added that this is good, but this dungeon is not easy for a C rank. Still, it's worth a try. If you're lucky, the reward will be good. Recently, it seems someone got a strength potion. This award really interested the guy. He understood that the Cell of Power was a rare reward in the dungeons. Regardless of rank, it was a high-level potion that could cure any curse or disease. Jae-ho asked him what he thought about it, whether it was good. This time he would not be a porter, but a full-fledged member of the team. Ju did not agree quickly and asked about the payment. The hunter asked what he meant by payment, since they were no longer porters, and of course it would be a fair share of the profits. The protagonist understood that this was very good. If the strength potion was sold, its average price would be around 50 million won. It turns out that if you divide it by at least 6 people, then it's approximately 8.5 million for each. And this was already very good money, and Ju was very happy. At that moment, his interlocutor interrupted his thoughts and asked if he would join, since the choice was definitely his. Dong-hoon agreed and said that he was already tired of being a porter. He thought that he was curious to see the power of his evolved skeletons in action, and this was a good chance to do so. Jae-ho said that was good. Then he just had to come to that place next Monday. The guy noted that he was looking forward to the opportunity to work with them. And so, training once again with the master and the skeletons, he told about the dungeon. For some reason, the hunters here become stronger thanks to these dungeons. The master said that it was funny. A newbie who hadn't even mastered the basics was trying to run without knowing how to walk. But the boy asked the elder to understand, because he also needed to earn a living. Then the teacher said that this principle is not bad, because he prefers practical experience. It is better anyway. Hearing this, Ju was delighted and asked if he would allow him to do so. But the coach shouted that he would not tolerate skipping his own training. He also didn't understand what kind of strange reaction he had. Did he really want to shirk? And he knew that he could call him to the dungeon. The guy wanted to say something else, but he shouted that there was no time left and the massage needed to start. Ju was terrified again, anticipating that he would be maimed again. Soon the guy would again feel hellish pain in his own body. And the teacher said that that was enough for today, and the work had been done well. The hero was not pleased with this praise because he almost died again, although the moment was joyful because a new skill appeared, which he acquired during the massage. Resistance to pain, he resists pain, and as it intensifies, his feelings become weaker, so that if it were not for this, he would have been dead long ago. Fortunately for the guy, this skill also has potential for development. The master in turn told him that he had passed his test quite well, and Ju noticed all this precisely thanks to him. The old man even began to be proud of him, and said that he thought that tomorrow they would be able to increase the intensity of their training a little. This prospect did not please the guy at all, because he noticed that he had probably been misunderstood. But his interlocutor did not hear him, and only said that they should begin their training with the skeletons. That's why he attracted attention to himself and said that not everyone had gathered together for the fight. Next, let them come here and squat down as they did last time. From now on, while they were training their physiques, he would teach each of them one technique every day, so he asked who wanted to be the first. Since the skeletons could not speak, he pointed to the one with the ball and declared that he would be it. The subordinate immediately looked at his master for consent. When she was yes, but the master said that this is a butcher, he has no skill and all he does is wave a sword. It's okay, as far as skill goes, they can develop it as they go. So he ordered the bone creature to start swinging the sword. The skeleton couldn't quite understand why this old man was starting to order him around. Then the hero said that everything was fine. He would make him the greatest swordsman, although he will have to train until his bones break. And even the skeleton didn't like this prospect at all. But after a short period of time, training finally began. At that moment, an old man approached the hero and asked if his name was really Ju Dong-hoon. The guy replied that he understood everything correctly, and he said that he would call him that, after which I immediately asked him what he thought fencing was. In response to this, the protagonist said, "Since it is called fencing, then isn't it a technique that uses a sword?" The mentor stated that this was a fairly simple way of thinking, as he expected. Although it turns out that he is right, there is no need to think too much about it. Fencing skill is simply the ability to handle a ball. Nothing more, nothing less. He then threw the stick towards the student and told him to pick it up. Dong-hun understood everything at that moment. The old man not only wants to be with you. The skeletons inherited all the techniques, but it turns out that he wants him to inherit them as well. After raising the stick, the boy stood waiting, and the old man told him to use it. The hero, in turn, could not quite understand how he wanted him to use it. The teacher noted that he had recently told him not to think about it and to hold it as it was more convenient for him. Soon he asked if he had done what he had asked and received a confirming answer. The old man said that this was good, and in that case, let him swing as hard as he could. While the guy was doing this, the mentor praised him and said that he was a good boy. Although the hero was surprised by these words, he did not understand whether this old man was really a master of the highest quality. Suddenly, the master approached him and asked him to look at the circumference of his right hand. It turns out that the thumb is firmly raised, and the other 4 fingers hold it in place. As for the swing position, he swung once from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and then again from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock. That's how it all happened, even though he hadn't even taught the boy anything yet. And it turns out that he instinctively swung because he thought it was more convenient to cut, and his perception of cutting was based on everything he had experienced in his life. That's why it's necessary for him to simply put his life into this swing. Then he asked to be allowed to ask one question. If he added force and speed to the cut he had just made, would it become more powerful or not? Ju immediately thought about it, and the master said that he was making a stupid face. Any cut becomes more powerful if you add your speed, a very simple fact that will never change, even if the end of the world comes. After thinking about it for a bit, the guy really understood everything. The teacher wants him to create his own cut and then add strength to it as well as speed. The master, looking at him in turn, stated that it seemed he was beginning to understand everything. In that case, does he now know what will happen if he repeats the cut 1,000,000 times and reaches its peak? Taking the weapon in his hands, he asked to watch carefully, because this is exactly the fencing that he and this skeleton will learn. The guy began to watch carefully, expecting the most powerful fencing technique. The old man, in turn, using the weapon in his hand, began to swing it in different directions. He didn't say anything, as if he were trying to fight the air. And when he finished showing his art, he declared that there was no theory. The student simply needs to make his cut stronger. If he does this, everyone will end up using his cut as a base. Dong-hoon understood everything. There was nothing wrong with his posture being awkward. Who cares if he swings his sword differently? It's his sword, and he can swing it however he likes. And then, after just a short period of time, the system reported that he had acquired the cutting skill and that this skill had potential for further development. Guildmaster Parang, ranked 58th in the world of Gipparang, sat in his office. The nickname of this master of his craft is Beautiful Bow. Suddenly, the door to his office swung open and Soy Yul walked in. The guy immediately asked what was the matter, because it was the first time she had come to him. The girl actually said that something has been bothering her lately. That's why I asked if a D-rank hunter could suddenly display strength superior to that of a ranker. The interlocutor noted that this was a rather strange question, but Soy Yul asked to simply answer. Gipparang said usually, even if you apply lucky chances or learn a skill, it takes time to make it your own. He would say it was unlikely if such a case were the only explanation, it would be that he hid his abilities. The girl noticed that he definitely wasn't hiding anything. The interlocutor believed her, since even rankers cannot hide their abilities from her eyes. After all, the Dark Empress has a search skill that can easily handle this. That's why the guy didn't say it didn't make sense, but I wonder what happened. Soy Yul, in turn, realized that she had not yet reported to her brother about that dungeon. And this happened because, as he generally told him, she was defeated more than once. Remembering the old man, she burst into tears and had never felt so helpless. And yet he can't understand how a normally low-level hunter could do anything. Of course, his first impression was indeed unusual. She was curious to look at him, so she gave him a chance. And this guy turned out to be quite good, and he really did use it. On top of all this, he promised to tell her as soon as he sorted everything out, so she was waiting for something. Suddenly, Gipparang told his sister that she was somehow suspicious before she had a serious face, but now she even smiles. She makes him curious before she didn't care about anything except wielding a dagger. The sister immediately stood up and shouted that nothing of the sort happened and that she was simply leaving. The guy asked her not to be shy and just talk to her brother. Somewhere around this time, the hunters were at the designated location waiting for another person. It wasn't long before they saw that he had finally arrived. It was precisely the hired necromancer, that is, Ju, who came to them. Jae-ho greeted him and noted that he had sent the dungeon details via text message. I'm sure he had already checked them on the way. The hero said that it was so about the need to know everything. The main mission is to destroy and defeat the boss, is a very simple and typical dungeon. As the interlocutor had already said earlier, he had smeared himself with sunscreen and stocked up on ice water. The interlocutor was pleased by this, and Ju suddenly looked around. He wondered if there weren't more people here than this man had mentioned. It is unclear who these two girls are who are talking about the gate to the dungeon. Jae-ho saw the surprise and said that this time they invited 2 F-rank porters. No need to worry. They had already paid them, so they wouldn't charge him anything. Everything finally became clear to the main character, and he was able to calm down. He thought that in order to pick up the ore and objects that had been torn out into the dungeon, they must have porters. It turns out that this is a low-ranked dungeon, so I'm sure everything will be fine. After all, his skeleton can defeat an orc, a D-rank supreme being, in the blink of an eye. Soon the hunting party he was a part of entered the dungeon. The people were met by a desert, and the system reported the departure of the dungeon. The boy was told that he would be exposed to a harsh environment and all of his stats would drop by 10%. The members of the flight began to discuss here more heatedly than expected, and we will have to think of it as a sauna. Ju looked at the others and didn't understand if it was really that difficult. He remembers training with the old man and understood that all of this was bearable for him. It's literally child's play, especially compared to the hellish massage he gets from the teacher. And so he used the power of his necromancy, summoning the awakened skeletons. The squad immediately came into being, and everyone lined up in one line. The hunters present immediately paid attention to him because it interested them. One of the guys said, "Mr. Necromancer, it seems they are stronger than last time." Jae-ho asked them not to relax and concentrate. The types of monsters here are scorpions, as well as snakes. He asked the hunters not to be afraid, because these were only low-ranking monsters. They just need to watch them carefully, also let them choose what they are told and convey what they are also told. To this, the porters responded positively. Soon the detachment set off, and after a short period of time they did not understand how much longer they had left to go. Suddenly the squad's lyricist raised his hand and ordered everyone to stop. The hunter asked what happened, because there was nothing here. And suddenly they all heard some strange sound coming from underground. It turned out that it was produced by sand monsters that appeared very soon. The leader of the squad did not lose his composure, and grabbing his dagger, rushed into the attack. He shouted, and everyone quickly gathered together and stood in battle formation, and then got ready. The squad did this immediately, and said that everyone was in a fighting stance. The main character, in turn, was a little to the side, and saw that these were desert scorpions of the middle rank. They seemed to be as strong as the orc he encountered at the training ground. He then turned to his magical skeleton and asked it to use the air shield on it. And when this happened to his necromancer squad, he shouted to destroy them. At the same time, I realized that I had ensured my own safety. The first thing that came into play, as expected, was the skeleton tank. The system reported that he was using a low-level ARG skill. The desert scorpions, in turn, immediately concentrated on the fighting squad of skeletons. Kostian the swordsman immediately struck the creature's armor with his weapon. But unfortunately, it was not possible to penetrate it with the first blow. Donghun realized that even though he couldn't break through their defense, the attack still worked, so he shouted for them to continue. "If I do that, it will collapse." And a few moments later, arrows were already flying at the sand monsters, and the rest of the squad rushed to attack. The main character only watched from the sidelines, but he understood that everything was going more smoothly than he expected. Suddenly, Jae-ho came up and told the necromancer that his skeletons were amazing. It looked like they were lucky with this chance meeting. The guy noted that it was just a trifle. He was able to do it because he dealt with the largest group. The leader smiled and asked him not to be modest. Did chance encounters improve a person? Ju only thanked them for treating him favorably. But he understood that he was still alarmed by what is often called a chance meeting. In addition to everything, another equally significant fact confuses me. That all the hunters that are in this squad are very strong. He feels that they didn't need to take an E-rank hunter as a mercenary. On top of all this, they all know very well that it was he who received the reward from the advanced dungeon. But because of the non-disclosure contract with Parang, they cannot speak openly or ask him about it. These people have only one way to answer their questions, and that is to research even the potion. There are no surveillance cameras, and there will be no traces left. In addition to all this, everyone knows that accidents often happen in such dungeons. The guy understood perfectly well that he had to be careful, because now it was only a suspicion. The leader of the squad liked everything, and he was planning something. After a short period of time, the detachment reached some ruins. The system reported that this is the ancient king of the scorpions of the desert. In order to answer the ancient king of the scorpions, a sacrifice must be made. And for this, 2 offerings must be placed in special places on the altar. It turns out that the victims must be living hunters of F rank or higher. After reading such information, the hero was very surprised, because nothing was said about this. One of the hunters smiled at that moment and remarked that all this was strange. He didn't understand how something like this could have come about, and how they could have found the offering in the middle of the desert. And the other guy started to smile slyly. The porter realized that the situation was bad enough and asked the group leader what it all meant. J-Ho didn't understand, didn't they hear? 2 offerings were required, 2 living hunters who were F rank or higher. Therefore, it is not clear why they are frozen and standing here. Let them rise. The porter did not understand whether they had gone mad, but the leader replied that if it was more convenient for them to think that way, then they should not be shy. One of the girls asked why this was so, why they were doing this to them. Could it be that they originally intended to sacrifice them? The leader immediately smiled. And then he asked if they thought it was all strange, the pay higher than usual, and why anyone would use scum like them. If they in turn want to get high pay, they should pay a high price. Isn't that common sense? The main character, watching from the side, realized that this situation was definitely strange. He realized that if this man was behaving like this in front of him, it meant that he was confident that he could easily defeat him. The leader grabbed his dagger and said, "Stop resisting, let them go to the altar already." It would seem that the porters were in trouble, but suddenly the main character stood up to protect them. J-Ho couldn't understand what was going on because the guy didn't need to interfere, or it meant that he was going against them. It looks like this guy is actually more naive than he thought, or is just playing the hero. Ju asked him to stop his filthy mouth and asked what his goal was. Why did he then come to the mercenary guild and bring him here? The interlocutor noted. It seems that he is not completely stupid yet. The hero didn't like this pause, so he shouted at him to speak faster. J-Ho said, as expected, he had passed that dungeon not only by luck, so he probably already understood that they were interested in learning about the chance meeting. He doesn't know how he prepared and defeated that rancor, but that's why they went so far to bring him to the dungeon. They in turn do not even intend to fight with him. The guy was surprised by this, and the interlocutor said that they did it to show that they are such people, and ask if he would like to join them. Of course, if he wants to join, he will have to give them some of what they got from their successful meeting. After all, their team is fair when it comes to distribution. The main character just smiled and said that they were just crazy scoundrels. To sum up their words, it became crystal clear that they were villains and were asking if he wanted to join them. And if he wants, they will allow him to give his rewards. But is this really their plan? The guy really didn't like this situation, and he just wanted to send them all away. So he decided to fight and ordered skeleton number 3 to attack. He immediately drew his bow and tried to shoot, and the arrows flew at the enemies who had recently been comrades. Although the leader of this squad easily dealt with all these arrows, and then he noticed, so this is his answer, and then he will regret it. The hero said that he would not cooperate with a bunch of animals, and when he said this, you throw him off and rush into the attack again. So J-Ho had to defend himself against them, and then he asked the boy if he thought he had become stronger just because he had a chance. After all, just a few days ago, he was just an ordinary porter. Watching from the sidelines, Ju realized that this guy was stronger than he thought. It doesn't have a high level, but its strength is close to the next one, and perhaps even better than the next one's because the power is very good. Suddenly, the guy started smiling and asked if he thought he could beat him because he was the only one he was dealing with. This is his very big mistake, because he probably doesn't know why they spend so much fearlessness in unknown dungeons. Suddenly, the main character clearly heard a thirst for blood coming from the side, and at that moment, a dagger flew towards him, which, fortunately, was stopped by the skeleton. But even so, the necromancer, who is the summoner, felt this power. At that moment, a silhouette appeared behind the enemy squad leader. J-Ho noticed that the hunter behind him was an A-rank assassin hiding in the shadows. The enemy that appeared asked if they were sure that this was the right guy, if he was the one who cleared the dungeon that Soy Yul couldn't get through. The interlocutor noted that this was true, but he did not seem particularly strong. The protagonist realized that there was no way out for this high-level person, although it was a miracle that he had lasted so long against a B rank. And while the guy was thinking about this, he felt someone pushing him. It was one of the porters who apologized for causing the guy unnecessary trouble, although this was the end for them, but she was still very grateful to him. Looking at her, Ju didn't understand what they had done to deserve this. Besides, why shouldn't they be sacrificed simply because they are weak? He was determined that he would not let them do this and would protect these people. If there is one who appeared, has a high rank, then it is necessary to use a powerful ally who is strong enough. So he called the teacher to trample and wounds into the ground. J-Ho was already prepared to fight with Ju. And then the master appeared and said that he knew this would happen when a newbie like him went into the dungeon. The guy noticed the oldest thing, that the situation was urgent, and asked for advice. The mentor said that he should accept his fate because he was no match for these guys. It's such a pity that he, who claims to be his student, won't be able to cope even with such words. Then Ju asked him to stop complaining. If he died, he would not be able to achieve his goal. The interlocutor asked what of it, since he hadn't asked him to get involved in this matter. And it wasn't his fault, but only this brat. Even if the old man had mastered all the techniques, he wouldn't be able to do the impossible. At that moment, the masked man from the squad said that this was their first meeting, so he would ask politely, I wonder what he got from this opportunity. The protagonist thought about the fact that they needed the opportunity for the reward that he had received earlier. And all this means that this is the solution to his situation. They, in turn, try to intimidate him and pretend to be in control of the situation, but they will have problems if he does not cooperate and share his secrets. In this case, he knows what to do and everything becomes clear to the old man. Ju asked if this meant they wanted to know about his capabilities. The assassin said that it was indeed a reward for the dungeon that even that wretch Soyul couldn't get through, so of course he was interested. The guy smiled and remarked that in that case he would tell him he was an A-rank hunter after all. The interlocutor hid his weapon and said that it was a wise choice, more reasonable than he thought. The hero continued to say that everything was not so simple. He would not tell until he allowed him to fight this devil and the traitors. From this very moment, disappointment and resentment in his heart will not allow him to speak. That's why he asked if he liked the deal. The high-level hunter, of course, didn't like this. The protagonist, in turn, asked to understand that he has some kind of mental disorder. No matter how dangerous the situation is, he cannot stand it when his pride finishes. The assassin asked him in surprise what he was planning. The guy said that he doesn't think anything like that. He knows that you can't escape from him. Even if he had something in mind, he would never be able to deceive the eyes of a high-level hunter. The other person stated that he was indeed right. Jae-ho asked why his brother was hesitating. Was he really seriously going to listen to this nonsense? The protagonist continued to say that he knew perfectly well that he would soon die. Who would have thought that he could survive if there was a killer from the hidden shadows right in front of him? But even if he dies, I will let these scoundrels go unharmed. So he asked to let him do this, and if he cannot accept this deal, let him just kill. But either he must end his life right now. The assassin immediately asked him to wait a minute. He said he would give him exactly 30 minutes, but if he tried to do something stupid, everything would be bad. In that case, he will make sure that he lives forever in torment, unable to die. And he asked quite sternly whether the guy understood or not. Ju, in turn, immediately stated that he understood everything. And Jae-ho was very angry about the situation that was developing. He wondered if this low-level necromancer really thought he could defeat him. In response to this, the hero stated that they would not know until they tried to do it. Suddenly, the master turned to him and remarked that now that everything was over, he would intervene as he had promised, this time replacing today's training with practical guidance in real time. Then he asked what the guy should do to resist this killer. Ju answered him that he probably needed to conserve his strength as much as possible. The mentor said that this is correct, minimum effort for maximum effect, and also asked to be allowed to teach him the strategy of using the enemy's strength against himself. The boy thanked the elder and asked him to fight them with him. And so, after a short period of time, the battle of the enemy squad of skeletons began. The skeletons interacted with each other, delivering certain types of strategic blows. Because of these actions, the hunters even had to retreat because the attacks were sudden. Backing down once again, Jae-ho got angry and called the guy a scoundrel. At the same time, the skeleton wizard used the first-level fireball skill. And again, the enemy squad had to retreat because it was fire, although they could not understand since when skeletons throw fireballs. While people were running away, the skeletons rushed after him, not leaving him for a second. Therefore, the former leader of the squad had to fight the swordsman again. And this time, one of his blades was destroyed, which naturally the guy didn't like because he realized that the situation was bad. While I was thinking about this, I received a kick from a skeleton right in the chest. The assassin, watching this fight from the side, realized that the skeletons were simply flawless, and their movements too. It's safe to say that at this rate, this guy can really win the battle. Suddenly he felt something and was surprised by the presence. It became unclear why he felt the presence of this guy leaving the dungeon when he should be outside and on guard. Jae-ho was no longer in the best condition at that very moment. At that moment, he saw a shadow falling on him, which meant that someone had approached. Looking forward, he saw the main character standing nearby. The guy shouted at him not to come any closer and to leave him alone. The master said that Ju was too weak to call it a real combat experience, but it was a good start, and the student remarked that he would get real combat experience with this killer. The old man shouted at him not to be impudent, because he would have to give it his all if he wanted to beat him at his level. The guy said that he put his life on the line from the very beginning and was not afraid of anything. And when he was just trying to start the battle, he felt a strange presence. Also in the distance, the silhouette of a man approaching was visible. Then the master noticed that he was a fool. Another such killer had just entered the battlefield. The guy is really good at everything else, but he never thinks ahead, and that's bad. Ju realized that his mentor was indeed right. He no longer had a fucus up his sleeve and was still a weakling in this world of hunters. Even if he doesn't want to admit it, he should, but it's generally unclear why he was so confident in himself to take such a risk. Feeling the presence of another assassin, Jae-ho smiled. He asked the hero, "Did you really think that they wouldn't come with just one elder from the hidden shadows?" Ju understood that if this was the case, then the situation was bad for him, and he needed to run away. And suddenly the man who came turned to his comrade and said that it was time for them to run away because Gi Soyul was here. The main character was very surprised when he heard about the girl. He didn't understand why she was here if she was here. The one who arrived right continued to speak. It is necessary to act immediately, because there is no time to think. If they are caught, then they will definitely die. A few moments after the dialogue, he did not immediately run away. Jae-ho, in turn, was shocked by what was happening and tried to appeal to them, but it was too late. Ju realized that even high-level assassins had run away, which meant that this was the power of a ranker. Soyul, in turn, continued to be at the entrance to the dungeon. At the same time, I began to think that I was overreacting. She follows the guy as if she is actually stalking him. She was able to track him to this dungeon with the help of Parang's information. But eventually I started to think that all this was wrong. After all, he promised her that he would tell her as soon as he sorted out all the matters, if she gave him time. So in the end, I decided to give him time and wait a little longer. The skeletons in turn continued to fight the enemy squad inside the dungeon. Z was in a critical situation and wondered if Ju had decided that he would die like this. But this was not in his plans, so he decided that he would live in order to survive, using everything he had. The hero, in turn, watched this man closely and understood that he was trying hard. But he sees right through him because he can't defeat him by force, and so he plans to do something with the porters behind him. So the guy turned to number 1 and ordered him to act. After this, the skeleton swordsman immediately rushed to attack the opponent in front. Jae-ho didn't expect such a swift attack and didn't have time to react, so he lost his arm because of it. At that moment, the heroes wondered if he were weaker, would this man have spared him or not? Although he can admit that this would never have happened. That also applies to the rest of the members of this squad. The former squad leader sat down and called Ju a scoundrel, and also asked if he really thought that he would just tolerate all this. After these words, he successfully rose to his feet and quickly rushed forward. But the swordsman was already on guard at that moment and prepared for further battle. So with one lunge like this, he knocked this guy down, cutting off his leg. Because of this, Jae-ho received another portion of pain and immediately fell to the ground. And then he again called his enemy the last scoundrel because of what happened to him. He asked why this was happening, why he had to appear before him. The hero, not fully understanding his displeasure, asked what he was talking about. After all, in the end it turns out that it was he who appeared before him. Then the interlocutor said that he should simply not waste time and just kill him already. Ju turned his attention to the altar and asked how easy it was to kill. He apologizes, of course, but he won't die that easily. The enemy grabbed his remaining limbs and simply asked to kill him. But literally a moment later, a skeleton grabbed her limb. Then he lifted it up, and the man asked what he was doing. Naturally, the undead did not answer him and only dragged him somewhere. It turned out that he had to go as a sacrifice to the altar, where he was thrown. The protagonist said that they needed to sacrifice 2 living hunters to open the boss room. While the former squad leader was angry, the system reported that the sacrifices had been made and the conditions were now being checked. At that moment, Ju thought that if this hadn't happened, he would have simply left this dungeon without clearing it. But it still turns out that this is a completely different story. Now he gives everything that he receives in return from people. He responds to the kindness that is given to him in kindness. And he takes revenge for insults with his own strength if someone tries to take his life. And in that case, he will take their lives. Finally, in the system window, it was said that the conditions were met and the 9th seal was removed. The hero said goodbye to the fat ones he brought and thought that if there is a next life, then let them live well. On top of all this, he became quite curious as to why Gi So-yul wasn't here yet. The shadow ghosts had long since fled, fearing her appearance. If it weren't for her, everything could have gone completely wrong and the boy would have had to fight 2 A-rank hunters. And he, in turn, could have ended up on the altar instead of those he sent. While I was not thinking about it, I began to hear some strange sound, which literally indicated that the door was opening. The system then reported that the ancient Scorpion King had been released. His rage, suppressed for centuries, breaks out in the heavens. It was also reported that the awakened skeletons were suppressed by the presence of a powerful creature, and all stats were reduced by 20 points. Ju immediately became wary and realized that this was now making him nervous. One of the porters then turned to him and asked if everything would be okay. The necromancer smiled, declaring that he knew nothing, but he could say for sure that it was better than fighting with shadow ghosts. His interlocutors noted that this was most likely true. The hero was finally able to calm down and decided that he simply had to do what he had been training while lying down. The master, who was nearby, asked if he was sure he could deal with these creatures without the need for his own insignificant creation. Indeed, if a student cannot cope with something like this, then it is better to just die. The guy asked him not to joke with such a serious face. To which the old man said that he had no intention of doing this and that he should not forget to call him tomorrow. Ju tried to stop him, but it was too late because the time of the skill to teach all techniques had ended. This made me a little confused because I didn't expect everything to happen so quickly. After a few moments, a sound began to be heard, indicating the presence of the boss. And indeed, the ancient scorpion, which was very furious, burst out. The guy realized that in the end, he would have to confront this creature alone and let it attack. After a moment, he realized that the fight would not be so easy, and the skeletons immediately stood in fighting stances, awaiting battle. This happened because the Scorpio that was in front of them suddenly disappeared. Ju immediately began to hope that the attack would not come from underground. But to be on the safe side, I asked the wizard skeleton for protection, and he used an air shield. He, in turn, ordered the rest to also disperse and form a line. The tank, as usual, found itself in front, but protecting the necromancer's leader. And the archer, who was behind the line, suddenly felt something strange. It turned out that the ground under his bones began to crack and something was emerging from there. It was this creature that turned out to be the boss, who actually attacked from underground. The main character was surprised by this, because the creature ignored him and attacked the bone man from behind, which means he has intelligence. The monster really had no intention of attacking the necromancer and turned towards the other skeletons. In order to protect his subordinates, Ju immediately sent a tank there. After what happened, the system reported that the fourth number used a low-level ARG skill. Of course, this caught Scorpio's attention, and he already turned in the other direction. Don Hong saw what was happening clearly and realized that the creature was advancing on them. As a result of these actions, the tank had to use a skill called low-level block. The necromancer was glad that he had successfully blocked him, and now the guy had a chance. So he immediately turned around and looked at the wizard. And then, using his staff, he ordered everyone else to immediately attack Scorpion. Arrows and magical elements were immediately used. The attacks weren't that deadly, but the guy thought no one cared. However, he can say with certainty that no one will be strong against a whole group. While he was rejoicing and thinking that everything would be fine, the Scorpion suddenly turned quickly and threw back the attackers. At that time, the skeletons had to retreat a little in order to regroup. Ju figured out the fact. Although it was quite difficult, it was quite effective. Looking at the boss's condition, he is definitely taking some pretty good damage. That's why he told his subordinates not to worry if they die, just let them continue attacking. It soon became clear that the guy had only 50 energy points left. But that's good. As long as he has the energy to summon his skeleton, it's practically invincible. The swordsman fighting in the negotiations was destroyed by that same Scorpion. The main character, in turn, immediately used the summoning, and he soon found himself on the battlefield in good health. Scorpio was the one who was confused, because he did not expect that they would be reborn. The skeletons, in turn, without fear and with renewed strength, attacked him again. The ancient monster, seeing what was happening, immediately prepared to fight them. He tried to defend himself with his tail, but it was cut off by the swordsman. Seeing what was happening, the others immediately rushed to help and attacked again. The Scorpion's body, which consisted of multiple layers of protection, was damaged. The main character who saw this was a little surprised, but realized that it was good. And the system congratulated him on having defeated the Scorpion King in the desert, and he was happy. Although he understands perfectly well that it was quite difficult, since there were only 10 energy points left. If his enemy had been even a little stronger, he would have definitely lost. The system reported that the spearman's strength was also increased by 1 month, and their skills were also increased by 1. Ju was happy that the skeleton's skill and stats were increased as expected for a C-rank boss. Then the system reported that he had found the poison gland of an ancient king, the desert scorpions, and asked if he would take it. The hero naturally agreed and accepted this reward, for which he received the item. A poisonous gland immediately appeared in his hand and glowed in a normal color. The guy wondered what it was. Was it just an ingredient? The description said it was the essence of the poison, the king, which was hidden in the tail of an ancient desert scorpion. It contains about 20 kinds of highly toxic poisons, several effects, with which he can use it as an ingredient to craft equipment and use it as an ingredient for skills. The moment the skeleton didn't read this command, he began to address it. It turned out that skeleton number 3 reacts to the poison gland of the ancient king of the desert, scorpions. And then a congratulation about the hidden conditions appeared. It talked about making a poison arrow. In order to get the poison arrow skills, a certain amount of luck is needed. It is also necessary to obtain a poisonous ingredient of D rank or higher. The guy was surprised that the skill could be opened even in this way. He finally understood why the Dark Lord always talked about dungeons. The system suddenly asked if he was going to learn this skill. After Ju happily agreed, Kostian's status was updated 3 times and he learned the poison arrow skill. It also turned out that there were congratulations that he had passed the stage in the ancient Scorpion King and received a reward for this passage. Then a bright light appeared, signaling the exit from the dungeon. The porters at that moment were very happy that they were saved and actually survived, and also thanked the necromancer. Saying that they would never forget this, the hero stated that they considered this a good lesson and would not go anywhere in the future just because they were offered big money. And very soon they said goodbye to each other and went their separate ways. When this happened, Ju thought that he needed to check the rewards, and in the end, he received a B-rank ancient desert trace item. Then the guy was a little surprised and suddenly noticed a key that appeared in his hand. But the question immediately arose about why it was there. The description said that it was a key that opened secrets, hidden relics. He can open the ancient desert dungeon and is also linked to the hunter Ju Dong-hoon. The hero wondered if this was some kind of linked dungeon or something. He, in turn, would very much like for at least someone to explain all this. But suddenly he felt the presence of another person and immediately turned his attention there. It turned out that it was the Dark Empress who had been here all this time. The girl was a little embarrassed and said that they hadn't seen each other recently, and that earlier he had asked her to give him some time to collect his thoughts. She thought that he had sorted everything out since he was going into the dungeon, and besides, if she hadn't found him herself, he wouldn't have returned to her. Ju was very surprised by this, but said that he understood everything, although in reality he couldn't even imagine what he should do. Tell her the truth, or would it be better to lie? Looking at the blade that was on the Japanese man, he immediately wondered what would happen if she caught him in a lie. So it's probably better to tell her the truth, and it will definitely be better that way. On top of all this, he is a novice hunter who knows nothing about this world. If he can use this as an opportunity to establish a connection with a ranker, then he should take it. Then, having collected his thoughts, he said that she wanted to know how he got through that dungeon, and what reward he received for it. If that's the case, then yes, he's really going to tell her all this. But even so, he, in turn, has one condition. Soyul was a little surprised, unexpected that any conditions would appear. Dong-hoon said that first of all, he needs her to protect him while he develops. This surprised his interlocutor even more, and so she asked again whether he really owed anyone anything. In response, the guy noted that it wasn't quite that simple that hooligans were hunting him. The Dark Empress added, "Well, what else did he say? Firstly, it means there must be something else." The hero said that he is a newbie, so he asked her to teach him something that he does not know within reason, for example, talking about this key. Soyul couldn't believe her eyes and asked if it was really a medium. The guy realized that she knew something and asked her about it, but it was strange that this thing could surprise even a ranker, and it really was that expensive, probably. Then the Dark Empress asked if he had received it from this dungeon. The guy noted that she understood everything correctly, and the girl said that he was simply incredibly lucky. The chances of finding a medium in a regular dungeon are practically zero. There are less than 100 of them known in the world, and he is also tied up in such a way that they cannot exchange him. Ju knew it was good, but he wondered what he was doing. The interviewee continued to say that mediums are also a kind of lucky opportunity. When people immerse themselves in them, quests associated with them appear. These related quests increase the conditions in rank, eventually reaching S rank or higher. Moreover, all the mediums known to her until now had reached this level. Having received this information, the hero could not believe it, so he was very surprised. Then Soyul said the wounds were screaming at her, desperately looking for these items. Then she thought for a few moments and declared that she accepted his conditions after all. But even despite this, she added that she also has her own condition. After some time, she and Ju arrived at some place. It turned out that this was the place where he lived, and she asked in surprise if this was really it. Don-Hu said that it probably looked pretty shabby, although he also said that there was no need to follow it here. Soyul said that this was not necessary because a promise is a promise. After looking around a bit, she said that there were no tracking devices or skills in his circle of buildings. There were no hunters above the rank of D, so she could say with confidence that he was safe. The main character asked if she had already managed to check all of this. The girl noted that she had confirmed his place of residence, but for now, she would remain on the roof. That's why he should let her know when he's going to training tomorrow. Ju agreed to this and remembered how the deal went. The huntress asked him to let her watch his training. The necromancer didn't understand why she needed this, but she said that she had been watching his energy since he cleared out the old man's dungeon. And now it is becoming stronger and stronger exponentially. This alone makes her very curious about how he achieved such rapid growth. Remembering this situation, the guy finally slammed his door. He understood that he had already explained about the happy opportunity a long time ago. We are talking about that same old man and also what kind of training he undergoes. Although even in spite of everything, there is only one problem left. And he talks about shadow ghosts, and it will be bad if they continue to threaten him, although he intends to return to them as much as he will receive in return. While he was thinking about this and lost concentration, he suddenly felt that someone hit him. A strong pain, causing unbearable torment, immediately swept through his body from his back. It turned out that it was his master who shouted at him not to overreact as his body was beginning to take shape. In other words, it means that they need to increase the intensity, and he thinks he should understand this. While the old man continued to do this, the guy's friend asked him to wait, because this was just violence. The mentor was surprised and looked at him, asking what he had just said. What violence? Do I really dare to describe his great technique of the Heavenly Master? Painstakingly created technique, so vulgarly as violence. He, in turn, needed to be ready, and the guy immediately realized that he needed to run, but it was too late. After a short period of time, the pain resistance bench was there, but this skill also still had potential for further development. As promised, the Dark Empress continued to watch the main character. He asked, almost like a half-corpse, what she was looking at, and his interlocutor noted that she had seen this many times and could not get used to it. To think that he had been going through this kind of training every day since then, Ju realized that he had explained everything about the old man to Gi Soyul. It is absolutely clear that she, in turn, does not see him and cannot repeat after him. While Dong-hoon was thinking about this, the mentor shouted at him to get up since they still had 30 minutes. The student stood up with difficulty and said that he knew he shouldn't lie down when his level was so low and would get up right away. It turns out that yesterday Kostyan 2 trained and today it is the turn of the third number. Still, his skeletons are getting stronger every day. The only problem is that the stronger they become, the more he has to learn and train. The status window has appeared quite a lot, the skills of which he can use. His subordinates from the first number have the skill of tearing, piercing, and also shooting. The tank has a defense skill, and the guy has learned all of their skills except the wizard skill, which is a mage. After all, in order to learn his skill, he needs to learn how to use ki. While Ju was thinking about this, the old man continued to draw what kind of circle that was. Pointing to it, the mentor told the boy to sit in this circle and sit cross-legged. The student asked if he would just have to sit there, and was told to recite the formula for the great blue heart technique that he had taught him last time. But let him not pronounce it in her mindlessly, because he needs to concentrate. Let him feel how the formless energy moves. Naturally, the main character immediately started doing this. While reading the formula, he heard various sounds and continued to pronounce it quietly. The voices coming from outside said that he did not think that it was you with mentally, because breathing is the most important step in this technique, the old man said. It will be bad if he cannot exist, chi, while he teaches these skeletons the basics. In this case, there is no choice, and he will simply consider him a mediocrity and increase training. The guy realized that he was planning to beat him half to death, and he had no choice. That's why I realized that if I became stronger, I would be able to endure all this. As usual, Soyul was on the roof of the house, looking around. All her thoughts were racing through her head and were concentrated on Ju. The girl wondered if he really became the disciple of that strange old man. To this day, she remembers how many times he threw her. Remembering this, the Dark Empress continued and understood that it was terrible. She thought it was because of the lucky opportunity. His determination to endure the pain, as his body was twisted and his bones were crushed, was simply impressive. Therefore, she must acknowledge his strength and thinks there is no other choice until she watches him. The old man she couldn't do anything with is now next to the guy. Just watching him grow makes her feel like she might be able to overcome her limits someday. And yet it is very interesting to see how much this guy will grow, even a lot. At this time, a conversation was taking place in the main office of the Hidden Days. The guy who met the main character in the recent dungeon led to the main thing. The leader was told there that they needed support because of Gi Soyul. Then he said that they didn't really want to interact with this Parang guild. The owner of the Guild of Constant Shadows is called Nick Jokin. He ranks 92nd in the world under the pseudonym Cerberus. The subordinate asked for forgiveness because he should have sorted all this out before the girl interfered. The leader stated that this was indeed an opportunity that would allow him to hold the rankers in one hand. The interlocutor confirmed this, considering that it was not an ordinary woman who was showing interest. Nick added that it was quite tempting, and he had to admit it. After all the words were said, he immediately snapped his fingers. Then a girl appeared with a dark aura, asking if he called her. The man asked about the work schedule of the permanent shadows, and was told that they were fully booked for the coming months. The boss was a little confused by this, and then asked what rank Ju currently held. The ward immediately informed him that the one he was talking about was of low rank. Nick said it meant he still had quite a long way to go. That's good enough. Let them then clarify his schedule in a month, and he himself will come to look at it. This guy they're talking about interests him quite a bit. The hero, in turn, did not stop training and continued to do so. The Dark Empress continued to watch them, and again could not get used to it. Finally, Ju finished his approach and fell down, literally exhausted. Seeing this, Gi Soyul immediately turned to him. The hero asked what she wanted, and the girl came closer, after which she immediately said that she had to tell him something. Don Juan was interested in this, so he even stood up. The Dark Empress continued to say that she promised to protect him from any ambush until he became stronger. Then the hero noted that this was indeed the case, but he did not think that she would watch him 24 hours a day. The interlocutor did not understand how she could protect him if she did not constantly monitor him. Then Ju noted that she was a tanker, and she had a dungeon to go through and things to do. The girl added, "That's why she's talking about it now. She's been looking after him for several weeks now, even though she's been neglecting the guild's affairs. But there are things she needs to do." So she pointed her finger and said that he had two options to choose from. Speaking of the first, he follows her for 6 hours, or second, he uses the medium key he received after completing the dungeon. The guy finally remembered him and was even a little happy. After which I tried to call him, and a trace of an ancient desert appeared. It also showed some of its effects in that it can open a medium. Soyul said mediums, loyal items, and that means it will be a solo dungeon. It might be safer to be inside the dungeon than with her. The hero said this will be a B-rank dungeon. Won't it be more dangerous inside? The girl immediately smiled because of this and said that it was not quite so. He might not notice how much he had grown. This will be just such a good opportunity to test your strength. From what she sees, he should be able to get through it. Ju felt a little embarrassed by these words, because he understood that he had just been praised by a ranker. As an abnormal necromancer, no one recognized him as an E-rank mercenary. That's why he can't believe that he received someone's confession. Taking the medium in his hands, he remarked that this was indeed a good idea and he would choose the second option. So Ayul stated that she knew about it and wondered if he would go now, the guy noted. And why doubt, because he had finished his morning training anyway. Then the interlocutor asked to pour her energy into the key to activate it, and a dungeon would appear. The main character listened carefully to what she said and understood what needed to be done. Therefore, when I fulfilled this key, I began to be illuminated, and the system asked him if he wanted to activate the ancient desert trail. It is also said that he can still open this dungeon, and it is a solo one. Since Ju had decided to leave him, he did not doubt it, and only told his interlocutor that he would return soon. The Dark Empress said nothing to this, but only smiled, because she hoped that he would pass it with ease. The main character in turn was already expecting to end up in a dungeon. A few moments later, when the light finally dimmed, he appeared in the right place. The only thing that surprised him was that there was a pyramid right in front of him, and information appeared in the system window that he had entered an ancient desert and discovered a pyramid. Naturally, the first thing the guy did upon arrival was use his staff, and of course he summoned his own skeletons to make the fight easier. In addition to all this, he understood perfectly well that there was no need to rush, because if you think logically, the dungeon should be inside the pyramid. It was for this reason that he ordered the skeletons to remain in formation and follow him. They obeyed him, and the guy understood perfectly well that as D ranks they were too weak for this dungeon. This is precisely why we must fight as if we were weak. Approaching the entrance door to the pyramid, he opened it. Unfortunately for the guy, there was nothing visible inside at all. At the same time, he was glad that the door gave in so easily and opened because it was simple. When Ju entered, the system reported that a connection had been discovered between the dungeon and the hunter profession. It was then said that the dungeon was transforming and he could not exit it. The protagonist immediately became wary of this, and the door they had literally just entered was sealed. And when this happened, a strong surge of energy immediately rushed throughout the room. It was so powerful that all the skeletons, as well as the guy, were thrown aside. After a short period of time, the guy began to slowly rise. He said he walked in so confidently to find himself in such a situation. Then he turned to skeleton number 3, and he finally answered him. The guy was pleased with the fact that his skeletons were next to him. First, he was going to scout out the situation. And so the archer used the safe vision skill and sent the arrow forward. From what I saw, it became crystal clear that there was an open space at the end. But even so, the question immediately arose whether this was the right path. Although the hero has no choice but to move forward. And suddenly, right ahead, there was some kind of bright flash that blinded me very much. The system immediately announced that the guy had discovered the Solar Spear's resentment stage. In the depths of the pyramid lies the warrior and absolute ruler of the ancient desert empire, the Solar Spear. You need to break through the obstacles and get to it. Dong Hong saw many skeletons with spears right in front of him and didn't understand what the hell they were. One day, it was raining heavily on the streets of one of the settlements in the desert. There was also a boy there who didn't quite look like ordinary people. And this was connected with the fact that he had wings, which he waved like a bird. Naturally, the people who saw this shouted that he was a monster. He is a dirty, worthless creature. It is unclear how a half-breed can think that he can fit into their school, so let him just die. That's how some people tried to cut off his hands as soon as he was born. And some in turn tried to cut off the ankle amount. But in the end, it turned out that someone took his eyes. And then some man, who had a weapon in his hands, attacked him. But the boy, despite all his problems, fought very well and repelled his attack, after which he immediately killed the man who tried to kill him. All this happened, of course, with the other people who attacked him. The guy thought that if everyone tried to take what belonged to him, then he, in turn, would take what belonged to them. Returning to the real hero, he continued to look at the skeleton of what was right in front of him. Of course, he understood perfectly well that the situation was bad, and the system was talking about caution, because 100 ancient D-rank spearmen skeletons are approaching. Before the battle began, Ju ordered the skeleton tank to block from the front, and I thought that it was dangerous to stay in the open, and I needed to lure them into the corridor where they had a chance. After all, only a limited number of enemies can enter it, and he and his subordinates will hold on and destroy several at a time. Thus, many skeletons continued to advance in the hope of defeating the enemies. But the tank, along with the others, still tried to hold them back. Well, naturally, they attacked them with short attacks in order to destroy them one by one. This was done by the front line with spears and also a sword in their hands. The main character immediately thought that while everyone was eating, everything was fine. But despite this, Kostian 4's endurance will sooner or later reach its limit. So Dong Hong shouted at them that they should defend themselves thoughtlessly and retreat slowly. The skeletons obeyed the order, indicating this with the clicking of their bones. An archer also joined the battle, easily destroying enemies with his arrows. The guy was glad that they would defeat them one by one and set their sights on the next target. But while he was thinking about this, he didn't see several spears flying in his direction. He needed to defend himself right now, and due to his training, he grabbed the spear with ease, after which his swordsman immediately destroyed the one who attacked him. The skeleton wizard also had no intention of staying on the sidelines of the battle and had already prepared himself. A magical fireball immediately appeared in the sky, and the system reported that he had used it. Having accumulated enough energy, the wizard brought out this ball and hit many targets. The enemies in the limited area were destroyed, although there were still quite a few left. They did not look at the sacrifice of their fellows and simply continued on their way forward. And there were actually a huge number of them there. Seeing what was happening, the main character realized that this was definitely not enough. But he certainly wasn't going to despair and mentally thought that these scoundrels would come. But the enemies were not against it, because they had to defeat those who came to them. And so the battle continued as it had been before. The skeleton tank blocked the damage, but at a certain point his stamina was truly exhausted, and he could not stand it any longer and was destroyed. So the main character, seeing this immediately, used the power of his necromancy. Of course, he summoned a skeleton tank and spent 10 energy points. The enemies who had literally just destroyed him were even a little shocked. Dong-hoon thought about just picking up a new spear if this one broke and continuing to stab it into his enemies. With his own method and his own position, he will continue to do so. Therefore, the guy did not stop and now fought with his skeletons on equal terms. But of course, there was also danger, because he was also attacked in the same way. Thus, the fierce battle continued for quite a long time, until the main character stopped and his large amount of strength was spent. At that moment, the system reported that the solar copy of the sleeping pyramid had awakened, and he was also watching the guy and even mocking him. Sunspear asks if he really thinks he can stand up to them with such skills. Ju didn't understand why this scoundrel was laughing at him, not that he knew who this Sunspear was. But it turns out that he, in turn, cleared a dungeon much worse than this one, and it was he who convinced the old man, whom even a ranker could not defeat. The guy told the skeleton tank that they were moving on because this guy with the Sunspear was making him angry. So they continued on their way. The hero thought that whatever was in front of them, they had to get to it. And then, a few moments later, the system reported that 100 spear skeletons were approaching again. Seeing this, Dong-hong was horrified, wondering if this dungeon's trick was to spawn countless skeletons until he reached his goal. The battle with them had begun again, and at this rate there would be no end, it was clear. Therefore, the hero understood perfectly well that he had to get to the boss as soon as possible. To do this faster, I asked the tank skeleton to give up his shield, because now he will be tanking. The subordinate did this immediately, and the battle began in a new vein. The hero also asked the boneman to use an air shield on the wizard, and let the others cover him. They would ignore these skeletons and run straight to the boss room. It became clear to Ju that he would either reach the goal or fall earlier. Therefore, by betting on this, I decided that this way the battle would go faster. As Dong-hoon rushed forward, he thought that he had little strength left, and he had to continue fighting them to push back these skeletons. Even if it turns out that he breaks his left hand, he will use his right. The skeletons wielding spears immediately pointed them at his shield, but due to his training, the protagonist successfully threw them off, after which naturally he did not stop and rushed to attack further, using defensive weapons. The system kept telling him to break through the obstacles and get to the solar spear. Ju knew perfectly well that he simply had to get to this creature called the Sun Spear. His skeletons also did not stop and continued to fight. Therefore, with such an insignificant, but at the same time brave detachment, they made their way further and further. As this process progressed, it became increasingly clear that there was very little left. And then one fine moment, a light appeared ahead through the darkness. Dong-hong, after seeing this, fell to the ground because he was already quite exhausted. The system immediately said that the solar spear was grinning. And then his voice was heard, asking how a little man with such a level of skill dared to challenge him. As expected, he was not an insignificant little man, stunning, but surprisingly weak. The hero immediately wondered if he really knew anything about him, since he was only an E-rank hunter. It was at that moment that new skeletons began to appear, and this was bad. The main character became even more angry, because he understood that there was simply no end to this creature. And again, the battle that had been going on before did not stop even now. The necromancer's subordinates were also often destroyed, and he had to spend his own forces on them. Ju realized that if he continued to fight like this, he would most likely die. He had to focus on running forward no matter what. And as he continued to do this, he became very angry at this strange dungeon. After some time, he became very out of breath because he continued to stubbornly run away. And as a result, right in front of me, I saw countless bones. It turns out that they were all from the skeletons he had literally just defeated. But it's weird enough that I wonder if he's just running around in circles. In the end, whether he goes forward or backward, nothing changes. And while he was thinking about this, he again heard the clatter of bones, which spoke of only one thing. Indeed, there was a new 100 skeletons approaching, so Pal didn't have to constantly encounter him. He could no longer think rationally and was having fun. thinking about what he should do, fight them, or just give up. The biggest problem at the moment was that he only had 20 energy points left. But if you look at it rationally, there are only 30 skeletons left, which means there is no choice. They must hold out as far as possible, and the hero declared that his subordinates should not let them get close to him. His skeletons immediately obeyed the order and rushed to attack. Ju, in turn, decided that he had to break through while his skeletons fought for him. It turns out that he must gather his strength because there are no dungeons that cannot be cleared. And very soon he found himself on top of that very pile of bones, although it was damn tiring. At the top, the system again continued to tell him to break through the obstacles and reach the solar spear. The guy couldn't figure out where this solar spear was, but suddenly he looked up. There was something strange there, shrouded in darkness, and Ju thought maybe this was it. And in order to check this, I immediately turned to the skeleton tank. He ordered him to climb up to him and throw him there as hard as he could. Sunspear smiled, asking if he had finally noticed. Let the foolish man go to him if he dares to do so and is not afraid. He in turn will turn him into ashes, calling him an insignificant person. The hero noted that this is good, and they will see who will win. The subordinates threw him with all the strength they had, and Donghong flew. From the darkness that formed on the ceiling, several glowing eyes soon appeared. The main character in turn was not at all frightened by this, and he continued on his way forward. And only after a short period of time, the system congratulated him on reaching the solar spear. It was also said that the ancient spear-bearing skeletons are currently disappearing. Ju was happy about this because he realized that he wouldn't have to fight them anymore. After which he shouted that he had finally caught this scoundrel, and now they would see what he looked like. But the system turned red and reported that he was being more careful because the solar spear had been summoned. On top of all this, the memory restoration skill was immediately used, and in the near future, the guy will be transferred. Inside the memories of the main characters, I saw ancient times. It was right before his eyes that the solar spear appeared, which was still a boy. But this was not the life one could imagine at all, and he killed the man who tried to attack him. The boy said that these were the people who started to mock him, and also those who isolated him, so let them not accuse him of cruelty now. After these memories, some more time flew by, and already now people praised the solar spear, saying that he was a great hero and warrior born in the desert empire. They said that they were going to follow him and asked him to take their poor souls and save them. Hearing this praise, he only smiled and asked if they really wanted salvation. Then he just stunned them with words so that they wouldn't even think about it. You shouldn't think about surviving in this desert. You only need one thing, and that is death. So he immediately raised his mental spear up and told his subordinates to do this. They of course obeyed his order, and all reason did so. The Sunny Cop then announced that from now on they would kill each other. It is necessary that they mercilessly exterminate their relatives and burn everything to ashes, like a dried-up sun. While saying these terrible things, he only laughed mercilessly, literally mocking people. At that very moment, the system informed Ju that the memory restoration skill had ended. A bright flash flashed before his eyes again, preventing him from looking forward. But when this bright light began to fade, the face of a guy was visible in front. He had large dark wings and spears in his hands, and apparently was that solar spear. The main character began to look at him closely and saw that he had no eyes. Vague thoughts immediately appeared about whether this dungeon was really B rank. It's very strange because it looks like a master of all techniques. Finally, the boss spoke to the necromancer, calling him a vile and evil man. And then angrily he asked if he was really there to refuse him too. At that very moment he rushed at the man with his own spear. Donghoon realized that this was just terrible because this guy was going to stab him. Suddenly someone grabbed him by the arm, literally pulling him aside. And the spear that the solar spear wielded flew to the side. The boss of this dungeon was immediately surprised, wondering if he had missed. And the one who saved the main character was his master, who asked if he couldn't pull himself together. The hero couldn't understand how the elder could be here. After all, his energy was at 0, and he didn't have the strength to summon the skeleton or the elder. While he was thinking about it, the sun spear wondered how he was able to dodge its attack. And he asked if this little man really thought that a simple man could resist the technique of his spear. After which he aggressively rushed into the attack, but the master of all techniques blocked it with the help of his shield. The system reported that the old man had used the absolute shield skill at its maximum level. Donghun immediately fell to the ground due to the blast wave, causing the master to call him a stupid boy and ask how a student could not distinguish between illusion and reality. The guy couldn't understand what he was talking about and immediately started thinking about it. After which he began to rise, saying that this was not reality. The old man replied that it was all true. This place existed in his mind. While he was unconscious, this guy with the sun spear invaded his mind. He's not someone he can run into yet, so let him step aside for now. The master asked if he was a monster who ruled the world. This is really exciting. His skills with the spear, in turn, are several times stronger than those of a master. The protagonist asked if everything was really that bad. The elder said that he was a fool, because Tanz only talks about his spear skills, and overall he is much weaker than him. To think that the master found his entertainment only after death, it seems that it was not in vain that he chose him as his student. And preparing for battle, he shouted to the solar spear to attack, and the enemy in turn had no intention of stopping and rushed into the attack. In the process, he shouted that a common man had once blocked his path. These same people took his eyes out for no reason and mercilessly took away his freedom. So he's going to make them experience the same pain that he experienced. The hero watched the burning from the side and could not understand what it was because it was something familiar. And suddenly, an interesting thought came to his mind, which he immediately confirmed. If you remember, when he first entered the pyramid, a connection was discovered between this dungeon and the profession of a hunter. We are talking about the dead spears, as well as the stilettos with which the guy was connected. On top of that, these dungeon boss moves are very familiar. Remembering his spearman, the hero thought that it was him. The guy was surprised, and the system reported that the indignation of the solar spear is immeasurable, and its indignation at humanity pierces the heavens. Therefore, it is necessary to smoke the solar spear in order to achieve the true awakening of Bone 2. After understanding this information, Dong-hoon immediately turned to the elder. The old man didn't understand what he was doing, but he had already said that this guy was beyond his strength yet. The student noted that this was probably not the case, since he simply had to do it, and asked to be allowed to figure it out. At that moment, the system informed the guy that the solar bot drew attention to him. Dong-hoon also did not look away and watched. The master asked him what he was going to do, whether he had any way. The student said that this creature was a skeleton he had summoned, that is, his child, but the elder could not defeat it, and it was he who had to do it. The old man was very surprised to hear these words and asked what he meant. The hero understood that this was never really the master's scene. It was his scene from the beginning, so the guy said that it was his mind, so he would deal with it. This will need to be done until all his hatred runs out, and until he breathes out his father and gives up. So plucking up his courage, he immediately set about this forward. Sunspear called him a dirty man, deceitful and vile. He, like all these insignificant people, is simply insignificant. So does he really think in turn that you can understand him? Let him just not make fun of you. He hates people with all his heart, and therefore curses them. Having said these words, he grabbed his spear and rushed forward, shouting that he should die. Ju saw that a swift attack was being prepared for him and he needed to defend himself somehow. That's why he put his own hand in harm's way in the hope of saving himself. But unfortunately for him, he was unable to defend himself, and soon he suffered a huge wound. The solar spear, however, was not going to stop there and continued to strike. The master, in turn, just watched from the sidelines as his student suffered. The boy's exhausted body soon fell to the ground, and it was all covered in blood. At that moment, the pain resistance skill was used, but the hero felt that he was in a lot of pain. Although even having received such serious injuries that could have been fatal, he was still fine. So he immediately stood up and wanted this guy in front of him to give his all to him. The spear in his hands at that moment began to glow with yellow light. Ju, leaning on it, was even able to rise to his feet, although his body was torn apart by the spear. But he rose because he wanted the solar spear to release all its anger on him. The opponent asked if this man really thought he could bear all his insults. This is simply impossible, even if he could understand it. Such arrogant words made him very angry, and he rushed to attack. The main character, in turn, did not stand still either, but simply began to fight with him. The spears clashed with each other in a furious fight, and then only the sound of iron blows could be heard. In the process, Sunspear said that in this world, there has never been anyone on his side. He is half human, half beast, and a hybrid between a human and an eagle monster. He then asked if there was anyone at all who would like him the way he was. And after these words, he increased his pressure and knocked the spear out of Ju's hands. Then he shouted that he shouldn't have been born, because from the moment he was born, people at the station had been throwing knives at him. On top of all this, they took his eyes and tried to collect his hands as well. But that's not all, because they also tried to take away the ankles he had. So he asked the man in front of him if he knew this terrible pain. While the solar spear was speaking, it dealt miserable blows with its spear directly at the guy. The hero, although seriously injured, still said that it must have been difficult. After this, the interlocutor said that there must have been people who felt sorry for him. Moreover, even if this did happen, in the end they were all the same. They were afraid of him and stabbed him in the back. This happened until the moment when his emotions died and people were a lie and also a betrayal. They treated him like a monster, so he asked if it was wrong that he became one. As he continued to receive serious injuries, the hero wondered if this was the process of letting go of resentment. And yet, they said with attacks, one can feel that he is gradually weakening. Of course, the emotions of this creature are very strong, and it is quite difficult to understand them. So soon the hero asked him how long he was going to continue to be sad. If he continues to endure all this pain, then who does he think will suffer? Throwing himself at him once again, the guy shouted at him to think about it. If we talk about this whole situation honestly, then about the reason for his pain, he knows it perfectly well. Sunspear continued to rage, telling him not to try to judge him as he pleased. If he says he knows the reason for his pain, then in truth, he admits it. But then he was abandoned, and his emotions simply disappeared. They festered for hundreds of years, leaving scars that will never heal. So it's unclear what this man in front of him is trying to change now. Ju-ho noticed that he was saying that it's true that the past cannot be changed. It is because of this that he offers him to be reborn just for himself. The interlocutor could not have expected such a proposal, so he asked what he meant. The hero noted that he died and became a restless spirit who is still tormented. Those who tormented him are no longer there, and he killed them all. Sunspear said that it was true. Now he remembers everything. After all, it was here, in this very place, that he buried himself after killing all the people. So does this mean that he can now live a new life? So I asked if he was really telling him to live in a new way. The hero noted that he understood him correctly. The point is not whether it will be right or not. He doesn't say that the people who destroyed his past life were right, and also that he, who killed countless people, was also right. But at the same time, there are things he wanted to do, and things he couldn't. Ju tells him to enjoy them too. We are talking about those things that he wanted to do but still did not have time or was not able to. Even if it was only for a moment, the guy really felt his past. He felt what was causing him pain and what emotions he experienced at the same time and what he wanted himself. And in these very memories he realized that he wanted to see the world. What really interested him was the soft sand that was under his feet. Besides this, there were camels that roamed the desert with people. Sunspear thought about this for a moment and said that it was true because he was interested in the whole world. And this was regardless of the good and evil of all people, and this fact cannot be denied. The main character asked if all this wasn't enough for him, and his interlocutor asked what he was talking about. Dong-hoon stated that to be honest, he couldn't fully empathize with his pain. He felt it for a brief moment, but nothing more. Therefore, he does not want to successfully express his feelings and should not simply do so. He, in turn, simply wants to say, can he be honest with his desires, no matter what kind of feelings he experiences and no matter what bitterness remains. He just needs to think about the fact that he can go and see this whole world. Sunspear asked if he meant to say that he could show him this world. The hero smiled and said that it was true because he was a necromancer. Although he is cursed, he is still the master who controls death itself. The world he lives in is completely different from the one he lived in. But at the same time, there is a possibility that he wants to see a world that he has never seen before. If it turns out that this is indeed so, then let him simply take his hand and serve him. The system at that moment continued to report that the solar spear was continuing to think. And suddenly the interlocutor turned to Ju and asked if he was different from those other people. After all, as a person, he is the absolute ruler of the ancient desert empire. Half man, half beast, that is, a hybrid that has no equal in this world. He is a spear to smoke the high sun. Thus it turns out that the solar spear serves no one, especially if that someone is meant to be a person. That's why he was interested in whether the boy was ready to become his master. Information about a hidden quest appeared in the system window. This is a hidden condition for the stage of the insult of the solar spear. It is necessary to order that he is a true master. After proof, Kostian too will inherit the memories and will of the solar spear. The hero understood perfectly well that nothing could be done, and that meant he had to become a master. So he turned to his interlocutor and asked how he should prove this to him. Sunspear noted that it was very simple. Let him take his attacks and experience the true power of the sun, and not just the remnants of resentment. So the question arises whether he can do it. Ju, without a second thought, said that he should attack at any moment. The interlocutor did not stop, and after hearing this he rushed into the attack. The hero had no intention of retreating and stood his ground until the very end. Until the very moment when the Euro spear approached his head. At that very moment, a bright flash appeared, indicating that something had happened. And when the bright light disappeared, the hero found himself in the desert. Behind him was an old man who reported that everything went as expected for his student. He still managed to successfully resolve this child's grievance. In addition, the system reported that the will resistance skill had been improved, and he had acquired a top-rank will resistance skill. He told his mentor that it was not his abilities that were important to him, in which case he would gladly fight them again and again. And at the moment when the solar spear was about to attack the guy, his spear stuck into the ground. And that guy said that Ju is really different. That is why he knelt down and said that he wanted to be reborn, calling him his master. And this only meant that this half-human recognized him as his master. The system then informed the hero that he had fulfilled the hidden conditions and cleared the ancient Scorpion King scene in the desert, and that he would receive a reward for this. At this time, a fairly large event was taking place in one of the establishments. Many people were having fun, enjoying the festive atmosphere that reigned in the area. But this was not the case with everyone. Like with Gisoy Yul, she sang alone into the glass of wine she had in her hands and thought that it was very sad here. The girl attended this event at the request of her brother, but it was such a waste of time that it cannot be described in words. I thought I could endure it because it was a chance to interact with the other rankers, but when compared to that old man, everyone here is just a baby. She hoped to finish quickly and leave, but apparently it was not meant to be. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by some guy who noticed that he had been looking for her the whole time. They haven't seen each other for a long time, and he wonders if she remembers him. After this, a conversation broke out between them, and the man asked if she remembered the ranker he had befriended when he went to America last time. He and some other people really wanted to meet Soyul. I wonder if she wants to meet them. By the way, the interlocutor has exclusive whiskey, released in a limited edition. The girl, in turn, did not really want to communicate with him, so she glanced at her watch. In the end, she said that she would only stay until the end of the day, since she had a preliminary meeting. An acquaintance asked if she was really leaving so early, since the party had just begun, but Soyul turned around and thanked him for today. The interlocutor returned with her and looked at her back for some time. And he was also angry because she was such an annoying woman. It was unclear whether the fact that she was a ranker made her special. So the rumors that have been circulating lately turn out to be true, and she is hiding the guy. This is quite interesting information, which means it will need to be verified. The main character finally returned from the potion he had entered recently, and the first thing he did when he returned was breathe out a sigh of relief, after which he immediately fell to the ground without strength and thought that he was already going to die. In addition to all this, looking around, it became extremely clear that the sun had not yet set. Soyul told him that she would be gone for about 6 hours, so she should be back soon. Suddenly, system windows appeared before the guy's eyes, informing him that his skeletons were being restored, and what was interesting was that all of their indicators had increased. The skill level also increased to about 8 or 9, especially for the spearman. Now he became special, different from the others, because he inherited the memory and will of the solar spear. The name of Kostyan DVA changes to Solar Spear, and all indicators increase by 10. Ju was happy because all 3 of the added skills of this attack that the Solar Spear used against him. The first of these is the blindingly shining solar combo. Next comes the Raging Desert, which covers the entire field with a sandstorm-like attack. And to top it all off, there's Soul Flame, which burns the soul to temporarily increase movement and attack speed. Donghun was happy because they were all just incredible. But the guy now simply can't call him Kostyan, so he will call him Sunny, because Sunny Spear sounds too disrespectful. However, this was not all, because it was necessary to check the reward. The guy overcame this from an immeasurable level, and a great achievement was accomplished. For this, a reward was distributed to him, and he received a golden random box item. The most interesting thing was that she had the highest rank. Ju, on the other hand, is an E-rank hunter, and he's never gotten even a decent item. And now he has an item of such a high level, and it's simply amazing. The system immediately asked him if he wanted to open the golden random box. The guy immediately wanted to do it, and she began to open up. As a result of these actions, the thing that was in his hands rose up and began to glow very brightly. At that moment, as the light fell a little, some object became visible. The system immediately congratulated the guy on receiving a high-level item. And this item is called the Fire Dragon Staff. It is imbued with the power of the legendary Red Dragon and has several effects, the first of which is an increase in life force by 100. It also reduces the skill's duration by 20% and increases the power of less than the fire attribute by 100%. The hero was happy about this, although for a high-level item this is not so much. But when used correctly, the stronger the user, the more destructive this item becomes. The main character immediately became very interested in how much it would cost on the market. To do this, he opened a special application on his smartphone and posted ads. But the commentators didn't appreciate this request because they thought that an E-rank hunter couldn't have a high-level item. After reading them, Ju got angry enough. And he didn't understand whether he really needed to prove to them that it was true. He photographed this object so that they would believe him. He then posted video evidence attached to the ad. Now people believed him and wrote that this object is simply crazy, but it is strange why it has such characteristics. Some people didn't understand what kind of object this was, because it was clearly an abnormal statistic. What was surprising about all this was the fact that Ju's question appeared at the top of all questions. What was even more surprising was that this issue even made it into the news. The only good thing was that, fortunately, the Hunters Board has good protection, and the guy's personal information should not leak. Well, literally in a few minutes, the guy received a lot of messages, and he didn't understand why there were so many of them. Because of everything that was happening, he quickly decided to forget about selling because he was not yet ready to attract so much attention to himself. Suddenly, it occurred to him that there was no rule that he had to use it. Anyway, his life force has been restored, so check it out right now. In fact, a few seconds later, he tried to use it. The system immediately reported that the use of the Awakened Skeleton summoning skill was applied and it consumed 10 life force. The boy summoned his wizard and immediately turned to him. Okay, and then he handed him that same staff and told him to take it in his hands, then shocking him with the fact that this staff was now a gift for him. Naturally, his subordinates immediately took it and began to look at it happily. At the same time, information appeared in the system window that Kostyan was equipping 5 Fire Dragon courses. Ju was glad because usually the undead necromancer can't equip items. But this, in turn, worked, and it is not clear what to do, as this is his first high-level subject. There were thoughts about whether to give it to a subordinate or not. Perhaps it is necessary to sell it, because you can get a good amount of money for it. The wizard noticed his master's unkind look and tried to hide the staff. Donghong immediately told him that this thing was very expensive, so he had better give it back. The skeleton shook his head as if refusing him, and the guy didn't understand whether he was against it. Then he breathed a sigh of relief and said that it was better than nothing if he could use it. The boy thought that perhaps the subordinate would one day achieve true awakening like the solar spear. Then it would most likely be the right choice. He sorted out the achievement rewards and will now look at the rewards for completing the dungeon. And so he received an item, the root of a high-level racial conflict. This item is associated with a certain profession. Ju immediately thought about what was meant by the profession. The item is a catalyst. It is able to reveal the secrets of the hidden ruins. Among the effects, there is the ability to open the dungeon forest in stone. It is also tied specifically to the guy, and this item can only be activated by hunters of rank C and above. Now the hero realized that he had received another catalyst and immediately remembered the conversation. Soyul said that catalysts are also a kind of fateful opportunity. As a person progresses further, related tasks will appear. The quest chains continue to increase in rank and eventually reach rank S or higher. All the catalysts she knew so far were exactly like this. Donghong wondered if this dungeon might be related to other skeletons, such as the Sun Spear. What if the 10 skeletons he has are absolute beings from their own worlds? But won't this make the profession too powerful? The guy didn't understand why it seemed to him that the mysterious system would fire only him. Although it soon became abundantly clear that he was thinking too much about all this. That's why his main goal at the moment is to become a ranker. In that case, he should use this system himself. The skeletons that the main character used were better known as skeletons. They are undead creatures that have only bones left in their entire bodies. So it's an undead creature that can't speak and can't do anything except move its bones. But then a spearman appeared after that incident in the dungeon that Ju had recently passed through. Right now he is speaking and calling the guy his master. He was also surprised because he truly could see, which surprised Donghoon even more. It is also illogical that a skeleton without nerves and muscles can walk and fight. And then Gisoyul showed up and said that it was really exciting. A skeleton speaking is such a rare sight that other necromancers would be speechless. Ju asked indignantly, what skeleton? He asked to be called the Solar Spear, because he is the one and only. Then he asked the girl if she was sure she could stay there. The interlocutor told him not to worry because she would protect him until he became stronger. But he wants to add that this will only go up to A rank. When he is around this rank, he should be able to take care of himself. Joining one of the big guilds will also not be difficult. And with its current growth rate, it won't even take that long. Donghoon smiled and said that this couldn't be because he still had a D rank. Then Soyul said, to be honest, she still can't believe it. When they first met, he was about 5 D ranks, like a porter. And now, just looking at this skeleton, or rather the Solar Spear, he is already close to level B. And Donghoon himself, it seems, is also improving every day. Ju understood everything and turned to his subordinate. He understood that the growth rate was definitely broken. If this absolute being, once exceeding the whole world, regains its original strength, then it can become even stronger. Therefore, I asked if he needed to personally supervise his training, and my interlocutor noted that everything was correct. He himself could hone his spear technique. Although this fragile body is still unfamiliar in word, so he will try to quickly restore his original strength to help him. The necromancer said that it was good, let him train himself. Sunspear obeyed his order and immediately began training. The protagonist continued to watch his training and became curious about when his rank would increase. If he was given an item that unlocks at C rank, then there must be a way to get to that rank. This means only one thing, that the guy's next goal is to reach this rank. After a short time, the heroes, together with Soyul, moved to another location, and there the girl said that the guys should definitely go that far into it. Ju noted that she helps him, so he feels it's wrong that she sleeps on the roof every time. At the same time, she has no need to worry, because he will never cross this line. Just like yesterday, she can spread out her sleeping bag there and sleep. The guy also thought that no matter who his guest was, he couldn't give away his mattress, because he believes that comfortable sleep is quite important. The interlocutor noted that he really shouldn't have gone so far for this. The hero didn't understand what she meant by this, because they should have a clear understanding of such things. He thought that he was still considered one of the weaklings in this hunter society. It would be bad if it became known that he had treated her badly, forcing her to sleep on the streets, because in that case her brother will find out, and then it will be hard for him. Gisoyul said that he misunderstood, because she meant separation. The guy immediately became embarrassed by this, asking if this was really true. The girl said that if she had captured everything, there wouldn't even be such a section. After all, his head would have fallen off in an instant. Ju immediately became very wary and did not understand why she was so strict with her. Soy Yul, in turn, continued to smile and said that she meant that it was pointless. Donghoon wondered at that moment if she was spending her time with only one thought, to kill someone. And while they were chatting pleasantly with each other at the front door, someone began to knock furiously. This immediately made those inside very wary. The hero could not understand that this was still happening because at such an hour there should be no one there. So he wondered if he needed to open the door. If it was a high-ranking hunter, Soy Yul would have noticed him first. Still, he opened the door and immediately asked who had come. It turned out that it was a tearful girl, and most likely she lives here. She immediately asked if he was by any chance Ju Donghoon, but the guy couldn't understand how she knew him. And the interlocutor realized that it was he who began to tearfully beg him to save her brother. Ju was surprised and so asked what she meant. The girl handed him some kind of leaflet and said that it was left in their house. He immediately took her lessons and saw a man who was tied up. Attached to the photo was a note telling Ju Donghoon to be sent to Cheongdo near the Han River before 8 in the evening. And if they report this to the association, then the brother will die, and so will he. If someone other than the guy comes, her brother will also die. The hero didn't understand what this was. Rather, it was a group of hidden shadows, because only these scoundrels were capable of such deeds. Gi So-yul came up and said that she had no idea that they would act so openly. The tearful girl, seeing her, was very surprised, because she did not expect to see a rancor here. The Dark Empress said their methods are exactly the same as the Hidden Shadow Group. Since she is staying close to Donghoon, it means they resorted to kidnapping. And then she showed her phone and said that on top of that, she just got this message. It said that the second squad was ambushed in the Hellhound dungeon. It looks like this same scoundrel is going to try to handle this as best he can. So don't worry, he's just letting her know if she has time. It would be great if she could help. Then Ju said, the Hellhound is Nick Zakin, known as the master of the group of hidden shadows, the girl noticed. It seems they also contacted Parang, and this is the perfect plan. The hero realized she must be worried, and he couldn't believe they attacked the Parang Guild at all. And yet she stays here, and it is probably because of her promise to him. Based on this, Donghoon said that they had no other choice. It would be better for her to go to Parang for now. The Dark Empress said that she could not do this, because her brother's rating was 58th. This means that he is not so weak that he can be destroyed by some small group of hidden shadows. But compared to him, Ju is alone, and once she leaves, who knows what might happen to him. The guy noted that this was indeed the case, but wouldn't it be better for them to first save the kidnapped person? They asked him to come alone in the end. The interlocutor said that it was an obvious trap, but the guy knew it. He understood that the Hellhound was busy with Parang, and besides, he had the old man on his side, as well as the Sun Spear. The hero noted that Soy Yul had already spoken about this, that life is a journey that begins with connections and ends with connections. Someone is connected to him, and that is precisely why he suffers, which means the guy simply cannot just stand and watch. Moreover, he does not want to be some kind of cowardly hunter and must give back what he received. After listening to this fiery speech, the girl realized that he would not back down so easily, and therefore agreed, informing that she would first go to Parang, quickly sort out her affairs, and then join him. She told him last time that she was ready to introduce him to many connections, and now it seems that it could happen much faster than she thought. The guy wanted to ask what she was talking about, but the girl had already disappeared, and he became quite interested in what else many connections meant. The kidnapped brother of the girl who came to the main character was near the river. Next to him were assassins from the group of hidden shadows who committed this theft. One of them looked at his watch, waiting for 8 o'clock in the evening. There were only 5 minutes left at the appointed time, so the boss said that the guy should be here soon. Their reality, he and his skeleton were approaching. It became clear to the people from the constant shadows that he was approaching them, so they grabbed the kidnapped victim and threw her aside. The man was conscious and saw the main character and tried to say something, but couldn't because his mouth was tied. One of the patrolling shadows smiled, asking if he really had come, and he probably had plenty of courage. Judging by the skeleton, he must be a low-ranking necromancer. The hero realized that all the hunters in front were of rank A, and perhaps there were also B-rank hunters there. The interlocutor noted that the guy should know why they invited him here.